All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Alpha Pod, Episode 2 of Season 7's Alpha League. My name's Slow Wolf. I'm your host for these podcasts. I'm your host for a lot of these streams, go figure. And I'm not the only one on here. It turns out that we've got a variety of other people. In particular, we got Erever, our TO, and often, in fact, pretty much always our co-host on this podcast. I think there's maybe one episode where you weren't here. And then he's not the only one we got here. Erever's, one person, but we got a third person, and we do have a special guest today. I'd like to go ahead and reintroduce the man who barely needs an introduction at all. If you haven't heard of TacticalTurtoise, then you've probably been living under a rock as far as online Warhammer goes. Trevy here has been running the T5S2 and a variety of other things online. He has a YouTube channel. He's been running TacticalTurtoise TV. He's been running a Twitch channel. He's been running a variety of different tournaments, including a brand new team tournament that he's been running up and everything. Trevy, hey, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Chad says, I am a rock. Who Trev? So, how about you go ahead and introduce what I couldn't, whatever I missed.
Yeah, sure. I host the TacticalTurtoise YouTube channel. We make a bunch of content about Warhammer 40k, talking about different units and strategies, and with a focus on competitive play. And then also, we run a bunch of events online. So if you want to come join us, if you head on over to the YouTube channel, you can find links to our Discord community, and we have. We play a ton of online 40k on Tabletop Simulator, and run the T5S2 tournament circuit, which takes events not only from takes scores, not only from events that we run, but also events from other communities all around the world, and put them together in a holistic competitive ranking system for online 40k, and we run a biannual invitational tournament based on that as well. So if you want to come participate in some cutting edge competitive play, come hang out with us.
In short, a lot. Trevy's been really making circles, to say the least, as far as online TTS is concerned. So definitely go ahead and reacquaint yourself with that YouTube channel if you have not yet already. And yeah, Erever, you're back. Sorry, I introduced you when you were gone, I believe.
It's no problem. I had to go get a drink to prepare myself for the podcast today. Hey guys, what's going on? Great to be here.
All right, so for today's podcast, we've done our introductions. We got a couple of announcements. Following that, one of our main things today, one of our two big things anyway, Warzone Charadon. Anyway, we'll get it in post. Is it good or bad? Then we've got also how to deal with the new, in quotes, OP faction secondaries. How do you deal with a faction that's got literally more choices than you do? And importantly, are there ways to deal with them? Are they good or bad? Might be another interesting discussion to have there. Then after that, we'll go into our usual win, loss, and list analyses in order to try to figure out how Season 7 is going, and whether or not the list that people have sent us, what's strong, what's potentially frail and could be punished, and all that stuff. So the fun stuff. Finally, we'll finish off with some Q&A, and then we'll close off the session. So, announcements. Erever, take it away. You're the TO. You're the one with all the announcements. I just sit here and enjoy the show.
Sure. Right. So first thing, we're getting towards the final week of League stage of Alpha League. So as ever, this is your friendly reminder: go complete your games, because there's going to be no extensions or anything like that. We've got a lot of new content from GW coming out, Drakari book, and all that kind of thing, and we want to get people playing those books as soon as possible. And a lot of people are wanting everything to speed up. So make sure that before next Monday, midnight, not this Monday coming, the following Monday, all your matches are completed. I will announce that. Also, next Sunday, there's going to be a very special announcement. I can't say too much about it now, but it's something that we've just suddenly endeavored to look in and have been approached by an individual in regards to something. I know that sounds very skeptical, but that is literally all I can say. I'm just going to start the rumor mill flowing right there.
Okay. Does it come with a promo image that's in black and white in order to tease our
and all blurry? Of course, I can have that arranged.
All right, great. Oh, that's just
yeah. If we could get a little snapshot of an ankle or something.
Yeah. An ankle. That's risque. Yeah. In this day and age.
Yeah,
power sword. It has to be a power sword,
right? Maybe the hilt of one sword.
You ask for too much, Trevy.
Ooh. Get those juices flowing. You know what I mean?
Anyway, so yeah, let's go ahead and start off with the first thing. And admittedly, on a personal level, Warzone Caradon is not something that I'm very invested in because I don't play any of the factions in it. But I've heard some rumors and some interesting opinions personally. So Warzone Caradon, for those that don't know, briefly outlined, is a supplement, much like Vigilus was and Psychic Awakening was. Where you have a variety of new stratagems and different ways to play the game for different factions in the book. This one in particular focuses on the Drukhari, Knights, Admech, a little bit of Death Guard. There's a whole host of things in there. There's Knights of Renown. I mean, there are Knights of Renown, but there's Armies of Renown specifically is what I'm looking at, and a variety of other things. And we're going to go ahead and cover most, if not all of that today. How viable is it for competitive play, or just how interesting is it in terms of ideas? What could this mean for other stuff going forward? And I guess overall, even though I hate these words, is it good or is it bad? Which are words that effectively mean nothing. So at this point, let's go ahead and start things off. Trevy, could you go into a bit more detail what Warzone Caradon is and what it represents for competitive 40K?
Yeah, so it's essentially a supplement book that contains some additional rules for army building. The first thing that you mentioned that it includes are the Armies of Renown, which are they're sort of a thematic way to build your army, and that imposes additional restrictions on your list construction, but in doing so opens up some extra options for you. So some extra warlord traits and relics and stratagems and a couple of special abilities. The ones in there in particular are the Mechanicus Defense Cohort, which locks you out of a lot of the really powerful Mechanicus options, but in return you get some extra sort of defensive benefits, and especially it being a defense cohort, it makes sense that a lot of it's based around sort of controlling your deployment zone and playing a very cagey game. There's also the Imperial Knight Freeblade Lance, which gives you some additional options to play Freeblade Knights, which unlocks additional benefits from them, but you can only have Freeblades in your army. And all of these are mono-faction armies, so you can't soup them into anything. You have to play only that one faction, and there's those extra restrictions on top of that. So they end up being super restricted on how you can actually build the army. And then there's the Terminus S Assault Force, which is a Death Guard Army of Renown that focuses a lot on the Harbingers Plague Company, which is the Poxwalker focused one. And so they have a bunch of abilities that interact with Poxwalkers. Specifically, they can regenerate entire units of Poxwalkers. So once they die, you can bring them back to life, kind of a la like a Black Cornucopians or
Green Tide, that kind of stuff. The cultists,
the unit doesn't have to still be alive though, which is the interesting thing. You can just bring back dead units, and you can also deep strike anything that you put into strategic reserve, so they can deep strike Poxwalkers as well to get them up the table. Very interesting, but again, it locks you out of all your vehicles and also Mortarians. So basically everything that's good in Death Guard you can't play. The other things that the book came with was a Cult of Strife supplement, so a full supplement, essentially like a Space Marine chapter supplement, which comes with like a whole extra almost book worth of stratagems and warlord traits and relics for Cult of Strife Drukhari detachments specifically, and also one for Metallica and Adeptus Mechanicus.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and start off at the top. In this case, I'd like to go ahead and talk about those supplement parts first. And the reason why is because those rules add on to the rules that we now know and already have effectively. It just makes those sub-factions better without changing any of the rules or anything. So it's a little bit easier to kind of dip your toe into. And it's interesting here that we've already got a Cult of Strife. Now, Forge World Metallica we'll get into in a second. One thing I heard online, just from from people, is that Metallica tended to be not picked at all. Most people forgot what it even did. What this sub-faction boost does is it tends to give them a leg up. It makes them actually interesting. And then the Cult of Strife one, the Drukhari Codex was supposed to come out 2 months earlier than it did, so this was supposed to be supposed to have a little bit more time to simmer before this sub-faction bonus kind of came in. And the Drukhari book already looks really, really strong. Not ridiculous, but definitely extremely strong, and particularly the witches seem to like really have hit a stride, and that this sub-faction bonus tends to like amp that up to 11. Like, does that seem like a pretty fair way to summarize how these supplements tend to work?
Yeah, I think especially in reference to the Cult of Strife supplement. I mean, like you said, I think Drukhari are a really interesting faction. I think the codex itself as well is sort of well internally balanced. For the most part, it makes sense. There's not like too many things that are super overpowered, but the stuff that people are pulling out and finding that are like super, maybe a little bit abusive are almost entirely from the Cult of Strife supplement and not the Drukhari codex itself. So it definitely does feel like maybe there was a missed step in there. I don't know if the design team that was in charge of Warzone Charadon and the crew that was rewriting the Drukhari codex were in communication or something. But yeah, maybe some cross wires or something there, because it definitely feels like you're just you're making the rich richer for sure.
Mm-hmm. And in particular, in a book that just got a big boost, that is just another leg up on top of that. There's gonna be a lot of power coming out of that. Erever, you are an Eldari player. You look at this, and what do you see? Like, is this...
rules on top of rules, I guess. Yeah, no, I get it. Like, Drukhari already got like their new book. It's kind of weird that they're getting this entire new cult as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a lot of scope already in the Drukhari book, and because they have such a big toolbox, GW is giving you like a million ways to now like efficiently run that. Either will like triple patrol and get it on refunding CP, or the space raid like detachment for everything. So it's interesting that they like got like even more rules when there's still like armies out there that have had like absolutely nothing. Like, if you were to take like the free Eldari factions, my question to GW would be, why is there not something for like Eldar in this book, who are waiting like 12 months for a 9-fed codex?
25 years for a new model, but yeah, I get you.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So let's go ahead. Trevy, could you go over what exactly Cult of Strife get out of this? Like, is it just like a whole new set of things, or is it just like a warlord, trade, relic? Like, what do they get out of this?
Yeah, so it's essentially it's very similar to a Space Marine Codex supplement. So they get a set of warlord traits that they can apply to their characters in competitive edge, unparalleled agility, and master executioner. If you've played against Drukhari at all, you probably know exactly what competitive edge does, because it's I think in a core of one of the most controversial combos that we've seen in a long time. So that's, I think, one of the most important parts. They also have I think 4 relics, it looks like, including Morvane's Agonizer, which is a whip that makes it so that you cannot fall back from the user, and also the Dark Lotus Toxin, which is basically just a frost weapon, but in Drukhari. And then they have a whole set of stratagems: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 stratagems, 12 stratagems, it looks like. So almost the whole codex worth of stratagems.
That's a lot.
No, that's not right. It's just 8. Excuse me. I double counted a page.
That's still a lot.
Yeah, 8 additional stratagems just for use with the Cult of Strife models. And there's some really good stuff in there. They can, I think one of their stratagems gives them flip belts, essentially, for a turn. They have a 2 CP to shoot and charge, in addition to the already existent Drukhari stratagem to fall back, shoot, and charge, so you can do it with multiple units in a turn. They can ignore Overwatch. They can reroll all of their wounds in the fight phase. They can improve their armor penetration. So just a ton of really powerful melee abilities for all those Cult of Strife units.
Yeah, but one of the things that actually I was interested in seeing is whether or not there be any new like secondaries or anything. There aren't, are there?
No, nothing like that.
So yeah, all like list building stuff, effectively, with stratagems attached. Cool. Right. What do you think? Oh, like, as far as the details go, folks, there's like a million billion pieces of content out there that have already talked about that stuff. And we could talk for hours, probably, about all the little details and everything. But I think that right now it'd be more interesting to talk about what we think about it as a general whole. So, Erever, I am wondering what you think about the Cult of Strife editions, that you know of anyway, and whether or not they add to the Drukhari Codex in a way that makes it more powerful. They probably do. And is there anything that sticks out in particular?
I mean, it's like I said, it gives you more options to play an already big toolbox army, and looking at it from an opponent's perspective means that you have to look out for other things to sort of prepare against. And whenever like a new book comes out, a lot of people are unsure of what it can do, and it depends like how much practice they get. But you might just get like practice against like one form of archetype of list.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it can surprise people. Is the thing, and that's very much a Drukhari style of play, like trickery and all the rest of it. I get it, but at the same time, I think it's just like a bit much. Like that they could have waited to give Drukhari new rules rather than just like going, here's your new codex and here's your supplement.
I do think that there's supposed to be like a 2-month gap in between those two sentences, but yeah, that's still 2 months is still pretty quick for people to get brand new rules on top of a new book. So Shuma Game says, "Oh, do you not like Day One DLC?" And the answer is no. No, I do not. I think that Day One DLC is
not even DLC. You still have to buy it.
Well, Day One DLC is even worse because it's an admission that the game wasn't entirely finished. Trevy, you've probably seen quite a bit of this being played competitively now. The TTS community tends to like playing with new rules fairly quickly, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, what have you seen with this stuff so far? Because I know that Drukhari is, kind of a new hotness of some kind, and that somebody out there is curious to try it. So what have you seen so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think the unfortunate part about this coming out so quickly after the Drukhari Codex is that it is, I think, stifling a little bit of creativity when it comes to experimenting with different witch cult builds. Because right now, with access to a bunch of abilities and warlord traits and stratagems that are all very good, there's very little because it's so focused. Drukhari subfactions are so hyper focused on one thing. In this case, it's punching people or like stabbing them with a sword. That they tend to be very good at doing that one thing, and that's certainly the case for these witch cult abilities, or these cult of strife abilities. So it's difficult to build a Drukhari list currently that, if you're bringing witch cult units, which you probably are, does not use cult of strife, which is unfortunate because there's a lot of really cool witch cult rules in the Drukhari Codex. There's also, I think, them coming out so close together, there's a little bit of like sort of cognitive load even on the part of Drukhari players, where they immedially have to learn like two entire books basically instead of just one.
Yeah.
And so the number of times, like, especially in like a timed competitive match, it gets really awkward where the Drukhari player's like, all right, I know I have a stratagem for this, but I have to look through both books. So give me like 5 minutes, and then let me find which book the stratagem's in. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird situation, but the things that are coming out of Cult of Strife specifically, I mean, I think the biggest one, the sort of elephant in the room, is the Razor Flail Competitive Edge combo. Competitive Edge being a warlord trait for a Cult of Strife character that essentially gives you an additional attack for each attack that fails to inflict damage on the target. And if you combine that with Razor Flails, which gives you 2 hit rolls for every attack, then you can double your attacks for each of those attacks that fail. You then double those attacks again. So you could be potentially making a total of 28 attacks, I think, is it where it caps out. Which is a lot of attacks, and you can buff that with the Dark Lotus toxin we just talked about for +1 strength and damage on those Razor Flails. You can use the stratagem for +1 IP. You can use the stratagem to reroll your wound rolls. You can just do sort of immense amounts of damage with this single character, and I mean that's very much what Drukhari are trying to do for the most part. But this Cult of Strife supplement certainly pushes that like through the roof. It's extremely powerful.
So here's why I think the word good and bad kind of make no sense. Because if we look at this supplement, obviously it's good, but also obviously, holy shit, that's bad. Like,
yeah, it's whether it's powerful or it's healthy for the game, I think, is like sort of the best question.
Yeah, exactly. And we can definitely say that it's a very powerful supplement. I think that's it gets a thumbs up in terms of power level, but like be wary, because if there's ever a chapter approved where they address the power level of some of these, they might bring a nerf patch to this. We'll have to see. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, we're also operating without the Drukhari Codex FAQ yet, so like that a lot like that combo I just mentioned may very well be errated into oblivion for sure.
It does sound really cool though to think of this one dark elf just dancing around doing a million damage. Like, it is very in character, like you said. So obviously one of the themes that we can pick up from this book is that they are really trying to bring out the character of each of these sub-factions, of each of these different ways to fight from these different factions. I think that's good, and I like that, and I think that will continue as we look at the Metallica supplement that they got. So Metallica's, I don't even remember what Metallica's sub-faction trait does.
Sorry, nobody does.
Right. Has that changed? Do people know yet? So for starters, what did they get out of the supplement? They got a warlord trait, they got a relic, they got stratagems, just like the Cult of Strife did. My question is, does it make a difference? Does it make a difference to what is arguably the worst Forge world?
I mean, your competitive play for AdMech is still going to be like Mars, right? Like with Cole, and then the guy who goes exploding sixes. You know, like I think it does, because this locks you to certain things, and I don't think you can take like Mars with it, if I'm not mistaken. Like,
this is a sub-faction supplement. It's not an Army of Renown.
No.
Okay.
We'll get to the Armies of Renown.
Metallica detachments unlock additional abilities. They have 3 new warlord traits and 4 new relics and 8 new stratagems, just like the Cult of Strife. I think the big thing to keep in mind, though, is that Drukhari are a codex that's like entirely based around souping your army together with their different sub-factions. So generally speaking, most Drukhari armies are going to have a homunculus one homunculus coven, one cabal, and one witch coven.
Yeah, either through the raiding parties or through the triple patrol bonuses that they can do.
Exactly, yeah. And so they're built around souping those 3 sub-factions together, whereas AdMech is very much not. So yeah, like you said, it's not required that your whole army be Metallica, but generally speaking, you want your whole army to be the same sub-faction if you're playing Adeptus Mechanicus or pure Adeptus Mechanicus. And so you are probably giving up a lot of, like all of the benefits that Call gives you and all the benefits that the other sub-factions give you. And that's a hard sell for sure.
So what would you get out of playing Metallica? Like, maybe you just like the color scheme, maybe you love the idea that they've got all these the crazy fluff that they've got. If I remember correctly, they're the guys like the super plasma. What ends up happening with Metallica right now? Like, what do they get out of that book?
So I think, like a lot of people, I haven't really seen
exactly
that are quite as controversial as the Cult of Strife stuff, and they're just not as exciting as Drukhari. So I don't think we've seen much play. Just looking through the stuff that they get, they have some, I think, hit roll manipulation. They
get there's a warlord trait for contagion, like subtract 1 from toughness, like on the warlord.
Yeah, it gives them like a 6-inch rad aura, right? So it's a -1 toughness aura out to 6 inches, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
They can add +1 to hit when they attack enemies within 12 inches of themselves. They can auto advance 6 inches, so very sort of Eldari style. And Metallica, as we mentioned before, nobody's really sure what they're. It's like sort of speed focused. They ignore the penalty for advancing and firing assault weapons, and they can rapid fire, or they can shoot their rapid fire weapons when they advance as well. So they have a couple of sort of speed manipulation abilities in there. They also have another stratagem to add or buff their Vanguard's rad saturation auras to 6 inches. So they have a lot of ways to reduce toughness on enemy models. And then you can sort of combo that with the speed increasing stuff to get those rad aura models up into position. So that's sort of, so there's some interesting things going on there. They can give +1 to wound stuff that's inside terrain, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's solid.
And and they have some morale manipulating abilities. So I think generally speaking, it looks like a lot of it is kind of predicated on those rad auras.
Yeah, it seems like it wants to get up close quickly, and it's a mix of close range fire and even like bringing in stuff like rust stalkers, or probably better melee people like the electro priests to do a lot of damage, because even like a 6-inch -1 toughness suddenly makes those electro priests a lot more deadly than they already are.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is interesting. It offers flexibility where other ones, like Mars, for instance, don't tend to. Mars is super predicated on the firepower that it can bring, and Call's ability to add rerolls, and the mortal wounds, and the their own like canticle of doom, where all your heavy weapons just get additional like benefits just for existing. The overall tone of it seems to be in the right direction. It seems powerful, but we aren't going to really know how powerful that all is until the new AdMech Codex comes out, and we know it's coming eventually. So I think I kind of need to hold off judgment on this one. It's not good or bad. We just kind of don't know.
Yeah. So it seems like, generally speaking, I think Metallica, in keeping with their theme of going faster, it has a lot of benefits to being close to enemy models. They can give you -1 to hit while you're while your models are within 9 inches of them, so they can be a little bit defensive against melee, which is an interesting direction that not a lot of Adeptus Mechanicus armies can sort of boast. They also have their base Codex stratagem gives -1 leadership to everything within 6 inches of a unit. So they can sort of combo that with the new stratagem to also manipulate combat attrition tests. And you can buff your attack rolls while you're near enemy units, and you can make your models faster and reduce their toughness. So I think it plays sort of like a weird Death Guard army, where you have the units going out to like debuff your opponent's models, and then you can use your longer range guns to benefit from those debuffs. Whether that's better than just shooting somebody with like 10 Iron Striders, I don't.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
When the answer can be easier, maybe it's better to go that way.
When you could just add +1 to hit and with a unit of Iron Strike.
Okay. So overall, the supplements seem to be interesting. And from what I'm gathering, they have options that are cool. But the Cult of Strife one in particular is just really, really powerful. The Forge World Metallica one does bring a often unused and unloved Forge World into a more interesting light. But again, we can't really make a judgment on that one until the new Codex comes out, because once that comes out and the internal balance of that army shifts, if it does shift, and it will inevitably, every single 9th Ed Codex has done that. We'll have to see whether or not this supplement ends up really boosting them to something crazy. Maybe they have like a -3 to attrition test and they can force them or something. Who knows? That'd be gross. Let's move on to Knights, actually. So Orion in the chat is asking, do we want to talk about how worthless the Knight stratagems are? And at this point, I think it's worth bringing up the Knights of the Armies of Renown. So the Armies of Renown, like we said before, restrictive, and it restricts your list choices. It makes your armies a little bit more focused thematically, but it gives you benefits to doing so. And I guess one of the big questions is, are those benefits worth it in a competitive sense? Since we're a competitively minded podcast, that's, I think, where our focus is going to be, because I think that for fluff reasons, absolutely it's worth it. It's super cool that you can go ahead and play Free Blades. It's super cool that you can go ahead and play Terminus Est and just be like, yep, Typhus and his buddies are going to go ahead and make zombies out of everybody. But for competitive play, we'll have to see. And I've heard actually mixed opinions on some of this, where famously Tabletop Titans have said that the Armies of Renown are actually aren't worth it, competitively speaking, at all. But a variety of other people have said, yeah, the Terminus Est in particular seems to be getting a lot of raised eyebrows. So let's go through them. We're going to finish off with Terminus Est, because I know that's the one that Erever wants to talk about the most.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
So, you're welcome.
Keeps me interested in everything else. Sure.
Right on. So let's go ahead and start off with the Free Blades. I think it's really cool, but at the same time, Trevy, and I think you'd agree with this, giving up your household traits to get benefits to free blades is maybe not worth it.
I think in the cases of all of these armies of renown, I don't know if the question is like whether giving up your sub faction traits is worth it. I think the question is whether giving up either souping in this case for the Knights army, or the options that you're denying yourself from taking this army of renown, because a lot of them have very restrictive list building restrictions on them. And I mean, the biggest one for this Imperial Knights list is that every unit in your army must be free blades. Not every Imperial Knight in your army, and not every model in the detachment. Every single unit has to be a free blade in order for you to unlock these benefits, which means you can't have anything else. There's no Imperial Guard in this list. There's no Custodes. There's no Adeptus Mechanicus. You have nothing else in your list besides Knights. And I think so far 9th edition has showed us that Knights exclusive lists that don't have any of those other units are not super competitively viable. You're sort of relying on you're relying on having a low model count, and your more maneuverable models being armigers, which are not super difficult to kill, to be so kind of your front line, and your Knights are then you're trying to linebacker with your Knights, but that's always awkward because if the terrain doesn't go in your favor, like your opponent can shoot you through obscuring terrain, and that's like very, very difficult to come back from if you have no other Imperium units that you can use to fill that sort of gap. And I think that's the real drawback of playing this Knightlands. I think otherwise, I mean, the abilities are really cool. The free blade benefits that you get are pretty sweet, and there are several ways in the Army of Renown to remove the drawbacks that you normally get from playing free blades.
Right.
Their qualities and burdens. Usually the burdens are kind of a big hamper on those free blade abilities, but there's ways to ignore them in this Army of Renown, which is an interesting way to go, and it's really cool. But I'm not sure that what you lose is going to be worth it.
Question from chat: did Chaos Knights get anything? Answer: no. I believe that this is all Imperial Knights, and specifically Imperial Free Blades.
Correct.
Okay. But we can expect that eventually most factions, because when they said that everybody gets a Psychic Awakening, they were not that was not the case. But when they when it comes to these kinds of books, they do try to get every faction. So that's probably going to happen eventually, but we'll have to see. So Diamond Boots, hopefully that answers your question. But yeah, I would agree with you. Knights seem to be in an interesting spot where they're relying on Forge World choices to really do well right now, and souping with those Forge World choices. Knights Megara in particular are very powerful compared to their regular Questoris class brethren. And they do particularly well when they don't have to worry about screening out their backfield, and they can just go as ham as they need to. That tends to do better when you got like a Rusty 32. Rather than one or two friends that you picked up along the way as squires. So I think that it provides some interesting some interesting choices, but only if you're really, really dedicated to playing Mono Knights. And even then, it's hard to turn down Housecrast. Like, just the ability to reroll all your hits in the fight phase seems really strong.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting sub-faction combos that you give up. Which is a big downside. I think there's also, interestingly, we talked about a little bit of cognitive load with the Cult of Strife supplement earlier, but I think this gets compounded with the Freeblade Lance, because you suddenly have to generate qualities and burdens for almost every single model in your army. So while your army might only be like 5 or 6 models, you have an entirely new so almost data sheet worth of abilities you have to remember for every single one of those, which can be kind of brutal for sure.
It does make them each their own individual character, which kind of goes to the point that Tabletop Titans made, where these armies tend to be really good for fluff. Like, if you're in for those kinds of more casual games, or like Crusades or stuff like that, this can really add a lot to like story-based gameplay, but we're not really here for that, and as a result we look at this and we think, you know what, maybe not for right now. So the Free Blades, really cool idea, but we have I think right now people are still waiting to see if there's any sauce that we've somehow missed before we say that there's actually something super competitively viable in there. This brings us to the next one, which is the Defense Force for the AdMech, and this one actually is interesting to me. I love the idea, but I realize that it literally just kind of goes, hey, we're going to take the slowest least mobile units in the army. Really give them a big buff, but then, we don't have anything else. Like, they can shoot pretty well, but then you don't have any Skitarii units, which is a huge chunk of your army. You're missing out on a variety of different synergies that you really, really needed. For a couple of extra interesting benefits, particularly to stuff like Castellans, Breachers, and stuff like that. What do you think about that, Trevy?
I saw there was a comment earlier, somebody mentioning that this Army of Renown gives a lot of benefits to Breachers and Cataphrons of all types, despite the fact that they are one of the more popular sort of archetypes of the army is to build that Cataphron Breacher spam. But the big downside is that just like the Freeblade Lance we just talked about, there's no optionality in this army like whatsoever. Basically, you almost entirely get access to Cataphron Breachers and Castellan robots. The biggest, like you mentioned before, the biggest downside is you can't include Skitarii units, and that includes like stuff like Scorpius Disintegrators and Archaeopters and Cerberus Raiders, and like literally, if you take like the top 8 best units in the Codex, they're all Skitarii keyword, and you can't have any of them.
Which hurts.
Yeah, you also can't like have the Inquisitors that I think are really important for completing that, like the Cataphron Breacher combo to make them super powerful. And so you end up with this really inflexible army that, this is kind of big do nothing army. You also don't get this one in particular locks, or it removes your Forge World dogma from all of your Extremis Sentinel units, which means that you can't take the sub-faction trait to give you exploding 5s with your arc weapons, which is like the other reason that Cataphront Breachers are good. So this is, I guess, on paper, a really big buff to Cataphront Breachers, but in fact, like in reality, it just removes all of the really important synergies that you need to make Cataphront Breachers good. So, it's not good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like it gives up too much for the benefits that it could possibly be giving you. Yeah, that makes sense.
A ton for sure.
All right, is this just the first Warzone Caradon book? So it is just the first Warzone Caradon book. So there'll likely be 2 or 3 more this edition. That seems about right. Oirian, good point. But that is definitely worth keeping in mind. But for right now, this is the book we've got, and fully, I think a third of the book relies on a book that isn't out yet, which is like a big ouch.
Yeah, we are talking based on like the current existent Adeptus Mechanicus book, which might entirely be rewritten. So yeah, I mean maybe it's really good in 2 weeks. Who knows? But
I think we're all kind of looking forward to seeing that, because that would be really, really cool. At least I'd be super down to see the AdMech book change, because holy crap, is it strong right now. The new one will still be strong, but like, it'll be different. Okay, so that's our thoughts on that Army of Renown, which brings us to the last one. And Erever, I'm going to cede the floor to you on this one. What does Terminus Est do, and what do you think about it?
Right, so if you're playing this Death Guard army, your complete strategy for the whole 5 turns is to tilt your opponent by bringing back as many Poxwalkers as you can and denying them as much primary as you can. Wait until they get very frustrated and start making mistakes, and that is your game plan. And having played 2 games with Terminus Est right now, that is exactly what I've managed to achieve. Because it can be like super oppressive to just have like 80 plus Poxwalkers on the board. Now, okay, you don't get tanks, you don't get Mortarion, but what you can still do is you can still fill your elite slots with Terminators. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. And we all know that Death Shroud and Blightlords are pretty tasty. And you can still take your Fetid Variants. You can still have your Fatal Blightspawn, Plague Surgeon or whatever as well. So that's fine. But the main stars of the show are your Poxwalkers. Typhus is neither here nor there. He moves too slowly to really be effective. The new Psychic powers are kind of wasted on him, really, because they're all like Warp Charge 7 with no like pluses to cast.
Oh no.
So it's kind of a hit or miss of whether you get them off. And even if you get like the good ones off, which are like the reduced AP for your opponent shooting, or the can't advance and charge and can't re-roll charges, even that one, you're running Poxwalkers out of the board, so Poxwalkers really don't care about AP. And if your opponent wants to charge your Poxwalkers that are moving out the board, they're going to charge your Poxwalkers. What they can do though is they can get onto objectives, surround like units, and just steal primary like every turn. They do stratagem to bring back like the full unit from like 0, even if like the unit is destroyed. Is like great.
Yeah, even
But I
Necrons
do
don't get
think
that.
you need like you can't just you can't legally run like just like a million Poxwalkers anyway. You have to have like another troops choice of either Plague Marines or Terminators in there to per unit of Poxwalkers. This detachment does not remove that rule in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I'd expect it wouldn't.
Yeah.
Poxwalkers, the army, it would not only be very 8th edition, but it would also be really frustratingly stupid looking. I just the idea of a Death Guard army without Plague Marines of some kind seems weird. That said, it is really thematic and interesting, like the other 2 armies of Renown. But in your opinion, it seems to have play?
It does, and I'll tell you why. Because right now everyone is teching like anti like elite units, so everyone wants to kill like Deathwing Knight Terminators or like Death Shrouds, as I've just mentioned, which are a huge staple in the meta right now. So if you're running around with this horde of like 80 plus Poxwalkers, and throughout the course of the game you're probably bringing about 30 to 40 of them back. Now all of a sudden that's a big difference. That's a lot of anti-horde weaponry that they have to suddenly spec into to deal with your army.
Right.
And a lot of like meta builds right now won't be able to simply do that. Would I ever play this army in real life though? Like going from that, if I was to ever go to an event, would I play this army? Heck no.
Why not?
I would have to literally have like 4 little buckets at the side of the table, and have all my Poxwalkers individually color coded to remember which guys were in what unit for the Dead Walk again, and then the other stratagem, and it would just probably just get far too confusing far too quickly, and I'd probably just end up clocking myself like every game because of that, plus moving like that many models around. So from that sort of standpoint, I'd probably never play this like in real life. I just wouldn't have the brain power to. For TTS, I think you might see a couple of people actually running this because it does kind of flex on the meta in that regard. Like, you know, no one's bringing a huge amount of anti-horde weaponry right now, so you can definitely get wins with it. It's like I said, because all the Poxwalkers are obspec, you could definitely neuter the primary of quite a few armies. And you've got the stratagems as well to actually make the Poxwalkers quite dangerous in combat. There's one for +3 movement and +3 piling, which is quite neat. And then obviously because you're Harbingers, you get the reroll to hit strat from the Death Guard book, and then you can do the 6's mortal wound on the hit to stack that on top. So they can actually do a bit of damage here and there as well, but you're never gonna like kill anything like big with the army, you know. Like that's I think like there was one game I played where I killed like 1 model of the opponents and still won.
Yeah, it sounds like it's that kind of army, which admittedly I found out this season I do not like playing, and I apparently can't stop belly aching about it. My bad. Diamond Boots adds that you could get metal Poxwalkers and then just physically break the table with them and make it unable for your opponent to win. Therefore, you win. That's one way to do it. By the sound of things, though, that sounds like almost like the not Poxwalker, the Plague Bearer carpets from Yester edition. Does that sound about right?
I mean, Plague Bearer is more survivable. Like,
okay.
You know, because Plague Bearers used to be able to go like -2 hit, you know, for pinball. So, kind of, I guess, yeah. I think the problem with like the Plague Bearer spam like right now is they're just too expensive to do it, and you can't get that like -2 to hit on them anymore.
9th edition disallows that method of playing. Yeah, but that durability and that idea of just my guys are here, you're gonna try to deal with them, and it's not going to go well for you. That's the play style.
The difference is with like units of 20 are much more maneuverable, particularly knife, than a unit of 30 as well.
Yeah, fair enough. Particularly a unit of 20 where it can just in your command phase spring some new models on an objective.
Exactly. Yeah.
Trevy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean it's sort of a classic skew list, right? Like you're skewing into the toughness 4 body and hoping your opponent can't deal with it. And I think it's probably gonna. Well, I think it's certainly out of all of the Armies of Renown, it's definitely the one that has the most play. I think you're gonna you're gonna run into the issue that every skew list has, where like occasionally like your opponent accidentally has the silver bullet answer to you, and for that reason it's just like difficult to win events with this list. you'll
Yeah.
show up and your Space Marine opponent's like, oh, I accidentally like have 3 Gatling Cannon Redemptor Dreadnoughts and
some Centurions.
30, and like 30 Vanguard veterans with lightning claws or something, and you're just like, well, I guess all my guys are gonna die. The other downside of and while Poxwalkers I think maybe fade this issue a little bit by the fact that they have the ability to deal mortal wounds. The other issue that a lot of the horde style skews have is that they tend to like take a lot of board space, but they don't actually they just trade their models for VP. They don't trade their models for your models.
Yeah.
So while your opponent is killing your army, their ability to continue to kill your army doesn't does very slowly decreases. You're not trading punching pieces for each other. So as you're going and your Poxwalkers to continue to push up the table, your opponent's just continuing to kill them. So
yeah,
and it can sort of snowball poorly that way. And I think especially like even if you're bringing the Poxwalkers back, which is great, if they're out of position, they're so slow. They have a tough time getting back into a place where it's they're going to get back to the fight.
Yeah. My worry there would
it.
be the smaller board size compared to 8th. Also has made it traditionally really difficult to deep strike at all. Even with small units now, it's tough. You have to be against like an elite army, and hopefully they don't spread out quickly enough for your deep strike to be able to actually be effective.
Yeah.
So now you got a squad 20 Poxwalkers. Best of luck.
Imagine you hit the Space Marine opponent like who's got a bunch of machine guns in their back line and then also has 2 units of infiltrators, and you're like, well,
that'd be a bad time. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's the downside of this list. I do think that it's certainly the most competitively viable out of all the Armies of Renown, and it's definitely like a really interesting and cool skew, I think.
Yeah,
definitely play somebody out there is going to have a freaking blast playing the zombie horde, and, like just moaning their way across the table, eating some brains.
I can't wait for an Orc Army of Renown to pop out of this, like pure speed freaks. All you can have is buggies, but you can have more of them now or something.
Yeah.
There's gonna be somebody out there that's just gonna be screaming "Wog" from across the hall. Everybody's gonna hear them every 30 seconds. Anyway, I think that overall, from the sound of things,
last thing I just wanted to touch on, sorry, was the warlord trait. Like, so they give Typhus this additional warlord trait, which gives him like +1 attack, which is cool, But then it goes on further to say that it removes obsec, and it also means that you cannot perform an action. And the first time you read that, because you're like, oh wow, that's like awesome, and then you read like the blah blah blah, and it's like on units of leadership 7 or less. And you're like, well, okay, sure. Like, okay, Death Guard do have a strat in combat to give -4 leadership, but it's only until the end of the turn. So in the next command phase, they still hold, because everything is pretty much above leadership 7.
Yeah,
so it's completely and utterly like useless. And in combat, you're probably just going to kill whatever was on the objective anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, the only armies that tend to have leadership 7 or less on a regular basis tend to be like Imperial Guard. I think even Genestealer cults have like leadership 8. Tau have leadership 7 or less, so long as they're not in a suit. Yeah, demons and orcs have leadership 7 or less, unless if the orcs have mob rule. I
don't think it's like entirely useless, because you can.
No, not entirely useless.
You can
for sure. It's just really strange.
If you stand on top of an objective marker, it covers the entire objective, right? So they can't most of the time you're fast. Your like disruptor units, like a 10-man guard squad or whatever is that's going to double move to the objective to contest it for a turn. Like we'll get hit by that, and then you can't. You just don't care about those guys, right? And those are usually the units that are low leadership in your opponent's army anyway.
Yeah, but
it's definitely is meta dependent though, right? Like if you're only playing against Space Marines, you're like, all right, who cares? For sure.
It's definitely something where I'm like, man, that sounds cool and all ish, but then I remember I've got access to, like, Necrons have access to something like a Psychomancer, where it's like, oh, I just have to roll 3d6 above your leadership, and suddenly you just don't have OBSEC. It's gone until my next morale phase for weird reasons. Or the new Drukhari stuff, they could give minus a bajillion leadership, and then just, not only do you not get OBSEC, but you're also running away in droves. So yeah, I can definitely see why that warlord trait doesn't seem amazing, but it does have some play, and it's an extra warlord trait. So
Yeah,
why
I mean
not,
it's
I
for
guess.
free. You're gonna take it, right? And the extra attack's cute enough to like make it viable enough, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it does mean that Death Guard are like the one army that can get the most Warlord traits on a single model, and they also have the award for second most Warlord traits on a single model for free. So there's that going for it. I mean, it's not for free, but the only thing you're paying is choices. Speaking of which, missing vehicles, that kind of hurts. Arrover, you're currently running a list in Alpha League right now that is mostly Poxwalkers, Deathstroke Terminators, but then it's backed up by 2 Contemptor Dreadnoughts with Volkai Culverins and then 2 Plagueburst Crawlers. I gotta admit, without those 4 vehicles, your list seems less scary to me.
Yeah, but that list isn't running like 100 Poxwalkers, right? It's only
That's
running
true.
like 50. You know,
Oh.
that's like the difference. Don't get me wrong, I think like I prefer to run that style list to Terminus, but I'm saying that like the Terminus S Force is definitely an option for playing Death Guard. You know, it'll get you wins. I think if you go to an event with it is like that skew, that you'll definitely pick up wins because you can just neuter the primary completely of some armies and just max your primary.
Like
I think a lot of, as we see more Armies of Renown come out, and certainly for this one, I think the best way to approach it is like not considering it a Death Guard list, but basically considering it its own faction essentially.
Yeah.
Like if you compare it to a normal Death Guard list, you're like, oh, I can't. Like literally, the best units in the Codex are Volkai Contemptors and Plagueburst Crawlers and Mortarion, and I can't have any of those. Like garbage, but there's so many other things that this list does that are different. Like it just plays fundamentally different than how the gunline style Death Guard list is.
Yeah.
That they're not like directly comparable. I think for sure.
It feels a bit like they made the Creations of Bile sub-faction for Chaos in that One Psychic Awakening, and it's kind of a prototype for for these Armies of Renown have kind of popped up as. The Armies of Renown go further than Creations of Bile did, but it seems similar in terms of intent, at the very least. It gives you a thematically interesting and fun way to play an army that you didn't have that way to like really play before, so long as you don't pick you only pick a certain specific subset of units.
Yeah.
Which brings us to kind of like an overall look at Warzone Caradon, and by the top of it, none of the Armies of Renown immediately make our eyes bulge and go, oh my god. It seems as if the Armies of Renown are actually not OP. If anything, they are not competitive for the most part, but they do have teeth. In particular, Terminus S has some teeth, and you'd be wise not to underestimate them. But that can be said for anything, really. And then when it comes to the supplements, to what amounts to a chapter book for other armies now, Metallica seems neat, but we don't have the new AdMech book, so it's hard to tell. And the Cult of Strife one has some crazy combos in it, but there's been no FAQs, so we'll see what happens. Although traditionally with the new FAQs and everything, the first FAQ that comes out is weak. Like, for instance, the Dark Angels one, the only big thing that popped up in that was you can't use On the Hunt more than once. There's like all this other stuff going on with it. This is like, oh, this is incredible. So yeah, don't expect the FAQs to change too much, but it could be important for getting rid of combos. Is there anything else you guys wanted to add for Warzone Caradon?
No, really. Like, there's no, like the only thing about Terminus is it does has like a few relics, but you're still going to take your stench fats on your like Fell Blight spawn. You know, it's like, so and the other thing about the list is it does require like a lot of CP to run, because that strat to bring Poxwalkers back is like free CP if you're doing it on a unit 20.
As it
so you're not really going to be specking into these extra relics, I don't think.
Okay, let's bring it.
Yeah, I'll get on my soapbox a little bit here.
This is your opportunity for the soapbox, dude. This is the reason you're here. Soapbox away.
So I agree with you. The Armies of Renown seem pretty like balanced in that they're not really going to break into competitive play, and you know they might be okay, and you'll have to play differently against them, but that's like as far as they'll go. And I think that that's a really good place for Armies of Renown to be, until they aren't. And I'm pretty worried about the release of future Armies of Renown. I never played in 7th edition, so I wasn't around for the dark days of formations. but I feel like this, if this feels like a first step to sort of, back down that path. I did play War Machine and Hordes, and for people who didn't play War Machine and Hordes, they had an almost identical mechanic called Theme Forces, where you would impose yourself some pretty restrictive list building restrictions on your list in order to get some additional bonuses to build like sort of a fluffier army. And they were almost entirely terrible in the second edition of that game, except for the ones that weren't. And the ones that weren't were the only way that you ever played that particular list. There was never any reason not to be inside that theme force. And until in the third edition of War Machine, they powered all of the theme forces to the point that they were the only way to play the game, and there was essentially no sort of list building flexibility at all, because you would just follow the restrictions that the theme force would give you, or you didn't. And I'm pretty worried that like a year down the road, we have 4 or 5 Warzone Charodon books, and there's we have 15 garbage Armies of Renown, and then 3 that are the only way to play that faction, and I'm pretty worried that that's what we're going to see. So I hope that's not what we see, but I think given GW's track record in the past, that's probably something that's pretty reasonable to expect sometime down the road.
Yeah, I mean, like, well, we saw that same idea with Vigilus. Eventually, no orc list went without the souped-up Shaka. No Genestealer cult list had... didn't take the like 2 sub-faction treats. The different detachments. So it's likely to happen again, especially because they explicitly have said that these rules apply for match play in this case, right? So the old ones, no. These ones, oh yeah. So we'll have to see. I think I'm going to agree with you on that one, Trevy, that they won't be OP until they are. But in the wings, deeper down, GW best be careful, because if they bring back the Riptide wing, I swear to God.
Yeah.
I've heard horror stories. I would like to be a part of them someday. Let's go ahead and talk. Let's go ahead and move on to our next topic. So, Warsaw Charodon, we'll see. Trend overall interesting. Could be good, could be bad in the long run. But good or bad again, don't mean.
I love the fact that we literally just spent 45 minutes talking about it, and we're like in between good and bad. Like, I get it.
That's where it is. Yeah. So, there's no secret that the new codexes are good. And one of the reasons, arguably, that they could be good is because of their secondaries. Each of the factions that have gotten a new codex have also gotten their own bespoke secondaries. This has a couple of interesting discussions going on about it. And although I think overall people are playing with them happily, there are a variety of people that will argue that they are toxic to the competitive environment that we are currently in. And there's other folks that really just don't give a fluff overall about that and think that they're fine for what they do. And there's another group of people that also think that they are sick because they give you secondaries that actually play to your faction in a more interesting and thematically appropriate way. There are a couple of outliers in particular. We know the Dark Angels, Stubborn Defiance, is a stellar secondary and practically scores 15 in most of its games. All the Necron secondaries have seen play in some way, shape, or form and tend to score well. Oath of Moment can score a maximum of 20 points, which is 5 more than you could possibly score. So yeah, there are some that definitely score really, really well, and they're really, really good. And I guess the question is, how do we deal with those? And on another level, are they impossible to deal with? Like, does somebody with a faction-based secondary just have such an inherent advantage that they cannot really be beaten? Let's go ahead and start off with the basics, how to deal with them. And there are a lot of them now. We've got access to a variety of different Space Marine books. There's the Space Marine Codex itself, which comes with 4. You have each of the supplements, which the new ones anyway, that come with an additional 3 or 4 as well. And the Space Marine player that plays those supplements can pick 1 from the supplement and 1 from the Codex, giving them effectively 2. You have the 4 from the Necron Codex. You've got the ones in the new Drukhari Codex, and we can expect that there will be new ones in the Admech Codex, Sisters Codex, Orc Codex, all this other stuff that's rumored to come down the pipeline soon. And all of them seem to be classed into various places. I think let's start off with the Space Marine Codex, because that's the one that most people would have to know. We've got 4 of them, of which 1 is amazing, and 2 are and then 1 is probably the worst secondary in the game. So I don't think it's worth talking about Codex Warfare. Let's talk about Oath of Moment, which I think is arguably the OP one. Trevy, what have you seen people do with Oath of Moment, and how do people play against it, if at all?
Oath of Moment, it seems to me so that generally speaking, for the people who don't know, Oath of Moment scores you 2 points at the end of the battle round if you have a unit wholly within 6 inches of the center of the table, and a point at the end of that round if any of your units killed a character, monster, or vehicle, I believe. And if your Space Marines killed one of them, and if none of your Space Marines fell back or failed a morale check, if I remember correctly. There are some factions that there are some sub factions that benefit a little bit more than others. Like White Scars, for example, typically don't want to take Oaths of Moment because they fall back a lot, so they aren't getting that free VP every turn. And if that's not the case, then you probably don't want to be taking it. There's generally speaking, you want to be able to leverage the 2 VP for holding the center of the table every round. That because it scores at the end of the battle round, that's also a little bit of a benefit to going second, because you can just put a model up there, a unit up there, and then you hold it. And it also generally scores the most points on missions where there's like a central objective or central terrain that you can kind of anchor off of. If you don't have those, if you don't have that, it's like, way less useful. If it's putting your army in a position where you don't want to be going already, then you might as well just take a different secondary to begin with. But in the missions where you're talking about sweep and clear, you're talking about the scouring missions where there is an objective in the center and a place that you are like actively incentivized to stand with your Guard veterans.
Really good example
priority targets, exactly. Those ones you're already going to be trying to push for the middle, and so it just it just scores you additional points.
I think that the only real downside to to Oath of Moment is that it's in the No Mercy, No Respite category, which is also where you get stuff like While We Stand, We Fight, and Grind Them Down, and other secondaries that actually be really good for Marines if Oath of Moment weren't in there. So when Oath of Moment isn't an option, you do have some other really good options, but you'd really love to be able to make Oath of Moment alongside some of those other ones. I think playing around this kind of stuff, there isn't much you can do, and I think that's the reason why it's a good secondary. Good secondaries tend to be opponent agnostic. They do not rely on your opponent's play, if that makes any sense. So stuff like Engage on All Fronts is entirely within your control, hence why it's good. Domination as well, largely outside your opponent's control, hence why it's good in the right situations. Oath of Moment fits that category almost to a T. If your list can do it, if it's the right time for it, then it scores you 15 out of 15 most of the time. Does that seem like a pretty fair assessment? Like, it's not that there's no play around it, it's just that the play around it is based entirely on whether or not your opponent picked it at the bad time.
I think that's fair. I mean, you can try to punish like sort of aggressive play. Like you are incentivized to push to the middle if you're taking Oaths of Moment. So there's going to be situations where, even though that's where you want to be standing, that's either going to be difficult, or just going to have them move Space Marine units into your threat ranges, which is good for you. But also, if the Marine player is going first and isn't able to sort of dominate board control, then they will have a hard time standing there for an entire battle round. So they kind of have to then overcommit to the center of the table, which is not something that every Space Marine army wants to do. Space Marine armies tend to want to engage on their terms, and if they're being forced to move up aggressively into the middle, that's not always the best for them.
Especially if you're dealing with a high firepower army like Astra Militarum double Manticores, which have the perfect profile for dealing with like Gravis Castles, strength 10, flat 3 damage. That kind of stuff will rip through an army really, really quickly, and putting yourself out in the open against stuff like double Demolisher cannon shots or Knight Megara with the lightning locks and all that stuff will result in your Space Marine army evaporating, even though you have to kind of put it in the middle to get points.
Right. Yeah. So but I think, like you said, that's definitely a choice that's made on the Space Marine player's part. So as much as you can set up to attack the units that are trying to hold the middle, like if you don't have the firepower to do it, then that's just not an option that's available to you.
That's a battle I think you kind of have to toss an L at and be like, you know what, I'm not wasting resources on that crap. I got something else to do.
Yeah, so So I think it is for the most part up to the Space Marine player to make that decision whether whether or not you're going to be able to punish them for pushing up aggressively. And if you can, then it's bad for them and they shouldn't have picked it. And if you can't, then they score 15 points. So very nice.
Yeah, so the play around that is just like trick your opponent to pick it at the wrong time. But honestly, sometimes the best way to play around a secondary that somebody else wants to do is to just make it difficult to get out of that situation. So like you said before, like you have to commit to the middle. Okay, so if they're committing to the middle, then they're not committing anywhere else, or they're committing everywhere else a lot less. So you can play around that by going for something like engage on all fronts. So suddenly there's stuff in the middle isn't stopping you from getting points for just positioning your guys appropriately. And if you've got the ability to strike at their backfield and start removing their ability to hold objectives where they are weakest, that can do some work because they're still incentivized to push for this middle or give up 15 points effectively. And that's not a choice that any Space Marine player wants to make once they've got this secondary. So if you've got the offensive firepower or the ability or the board control power to be able to mess with this a little bit, that's stellar. That's already really, really good. Like, try to be where they're not, I guess is the best way of putting it. Now, chat had a question about Codex Warfare. Why did I say it was terrible? So let's quickly go over what a bad secondary looks like for these faction-specific secondaries. And I think every book has a secondary so far where you look at it and you go, wait, what? Why? So Codex Warfare is based off of your doctrines. So for every doctrine that you in, if you get a kill on a unit with a weapon type that matches the doctrine, so heavy weapons and grenade weapons for Devastator Doctrine, assault and rapid fire weapons for Tactical Doctrine, and close combat and pistol weapons for Assault Doctrine, every kill on a unit you get with those matched weapons into their doctrines gets you points. And like actually scoring 1 point per unit is so small that like the chances of you actually managing to make that work are slim. It's not good. I think I've seen this thing score a maximum of 6 ever. It relies so much on your opponent effectively revealing parts of their army that are weak at exactly the right time to exactly the right unit. And like, you can't even predict it because it's all based on dice.
Yeah, I mean, like consider, how many units are in most 40k armies? Like 12?
Yeah.
Right? Like 12 to 15 probably, which means that in order to max the secondary, which should be your goal, you have to kill every single model in their army on the perfect turn, which is just it's just not
even happen. Going for like
it's so difficult.
Yeah, and like even going for a deploy scramblers level of points, which is like an average. Like if you can nail 10 on a secondary, it's not a bad second or third pick, and like purge the enemy for 10 is damn near impossible. So yeah, that hurts. It's especially hurtful because it's in a category that does have a couple of important secondaries in it. The Purge the Enemy category, which has Titan Hunter, so if you're up against Knights, you're absolutely not picking Codex Warfare for multiple reasons. One of them being the fact that there's only 5 units on the board. Assassinate, like, it's one of the only secondaries you can pick against Space Marines, and although it's a win more, it's one of the very few you can actually do. Bring It Down is in there as well. Cut Off the Head, we don't talk about Cut Off the Head. Well, it's bad. We've talked about this before. I think you were on that episode as well, Trevy. But
I think right after that episode we had Cut Off the Head picked in a finals game, and I think it scored pretty highly.
Really?
But that was because their opponent's warlord was Magnus, so it was
okay.
Either they kill the bunch or 2 they lose. So.
Somebody failed their warp time, I guess. But like
yeah, he just failed all his 3+ invulnerable saves and then died.
I ended up in a situation where I was playing against where I was playing a game with my Necron list in Alpha League, and my opponent, who is a very lovely guy, and I had a lot of fun. He was kind of forced to pick Cut Off the Head because there was nothing else to pick. He got like 3 points for it. It really sucks. It's
like even when it goes well, it's like you get basically nothing.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, that actually adds to the point here. If Codex Warfare is worse than Cut Off the Head, chances are it's not a good secondary. Like in most situations. Yeah. And the last one
I think it's better than Cut Off the Head.
It's
because at least you should get like 2 points on turn 1. you know,
think
and then you
so.
probably get a couple points in the you get like 5 on Codex Warfare. Whereas Cut Off the Head is like, usually you get nothing.
And like the hard part is that you're currently trying to predict, okay, so I've done enough damage with this weapon to put them down to this number of models. I'm now going to kill them with this weapon. And like the amount of coordinate, like to put it in Anno Camilleri's terms, the terms and conditions are so rough. There's so many of them. To get 1 point, it's just not worth it, man. Okay, so yeah, like that's an example of a bad Codex secondary. And really, when it comes to Space Marines, Oath of Moment gets picked a lot. I have not seen enough Blood Angels or Space Wolves games to know about their Codex secondaries.
Yes, Space Wolves Warrior Pride is like a huge standout. That one's essentially an automatic 12, if not 15. You just have to charge with 2 units during your turn, or be in melee at the end of your turn with 2 units to score 3 points, which is like trivially easy for that faction. And usually Space Wolves lists will have like a Land Speeder Storm or a bunch of Cyber Wolves, or just some random idiots who can like charge your like dumb screening unit to trigger that Warrior Pride. So it's super duper easy to get off. So I think that's another one that, I mean, there's also like essentially no counterplay because the Space Wolves army like at some point wants to engage in melee with you.
Yeah.
There's, like, what are you gonna do? Like, not go onto the objectives? Like, no, you just gotta eat it. So, I mean, you can do some tricksy stuff like try to pull models out of melee with existing combats so that they're not in melee at the end of their turn and some stuff like that. But generally speaking, that's a super duper powerful one. I think at least on par with Oath of Moment, if not better.
Yeah, and that kind of brings up an idea that all these secondaries are meant to make an army play to its strengths or to its wants overall. Like going to the Necron Codex for a second, there are 4 secondaries. They have Code of Combat. Every time a noble kills a unit, you get 3 points. You have Awaken the Ancient Machineries. You do an action with a core Canoptic unit on specified objectives. You get 3 points. You can do this on multiple objectives, so you can get up to 9 points a turn with that one. Purge the enemy. Just kill things as long as nothing's in a quarter anymore. You get 2 points for that quarter starting from the second turn. And then the last one, the last one I always forget, and yet I know it still scores okay. Let me just get it out here. But overall, here we go. Treasures of the Aeons, which is in the same category as Purge the Vermin. If you control like 3 different objectives that your opponent has selected on the battlefield, you score a number of victory points equal to the number of those objective markers that you control, up to a maximum of 5 if you control all 3, which is hard. So when you're looking at these secondaries, like, they're good in the right circumstance, and I think that that's probably where we'd like the secondaries to be overall for power. Because playing around those is interesting. There's actual choices and options, and if they are building for a specific secondary, that means that they are making list design choices to change things. And we're not here to talk about balanced ones. The Necrons ones are actually pretty fine. They're good. They're solidly good, which is what makes them really good. But the OP ones are stuff like Oath of Moment, a lot of people complain about. And then the other big one right now is Stubborn Defiance. So Stubborn Defiance is a Dark Angel specific one. It is, I think, in the same category as Engage on All Fronts. I would actually need to check that. Trevy, do you know off the top of your head which category Stubborn Defiance sits in?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm sure.
Let me check.
Find out quickly.
Just checking it myself now.
It is Battlefield Supremacy, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it's in the same category as that, which means that you could take Oath of Moment at the same time, which is kind of great.
Yeah.
So,
so I've got a few thoughts of Stubborn Defiance.
Well, let's explain it first. Eriver, could you explain what it does first?
Yep, so Stubborn Defiance, basically you select one objective at the start of your first command phase, and at the end of each of your command phases, if you control that objective marker with a Dark Angels unit from your army with objectives secured, you score a number of victory points depending on what battle round it is. So on battle round 2 it's 2, and then 3 it's an additional 3, and then 4 it's 5, and then 5 it's 5.
Yeah.
So as long as you have an obsec unit that can just not be
it's
touched.
importantly not the battle round number, it's the number of phases that you've held that objective. So it's if it's ever disrupted, you actually lose sort of an exponential number of points.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. Yeah.
Now, this is more difficult to do than it says on the tin. In practice, just because of the way that a lot of current Dark Angels lists are being built. Although that's changing a bit right now. A lot of competitive Dark Angels players seem to be shifting towards Raven Ring rather than Deathwing. And Erebor, stop me if I'm about to go into territory that you were about to talk about. But I was about to talk about like the Deathwing detachment giving OBSEC to Terminators, and what this means is that you've got Deathwing Terminators, which have a permanent transhuman on them, so they cannot be wounded on anything worse than a 4. Like anything better than a 4, sorry. And they sit at home, OBSEC, on an objective with a 2+, 1+ save and a 4+ invulnerable, largely unable to die. Out of line of sight, and they score you 15 points the entire time. And if anything tries to steal the objective, they walk out and slam it into the ground so hard that they come out antipodal. It's not a good time if you've tried to steal an objective from them before.
Yeah, so we talk about like baking in secondaries into lists quite a lot, and this is one of those where when the Dark Angels Codex came out, and people were like, all right, so if I have a 10-man block of Terminators and I have 5 guys with Thunderhammers and Storm Shields, that I can just sit on my objective and I can split the squad, so I can bake in both Stubborn Defiance and also have these 5 guys that are out of line of sight for most of the game and bake in while we stand as well. Which, at that point, you're a bit like, is this a bit much? You know, because some armies just have like no feasible way to like deal with this.
Yeah, at least armies the way that they're built right now. Armies typically these days are built around very durable units that sit in the middle and or sit on important objectives in the middle board and threaten everything else around them. They aren't really working around being super high mobility units that dance around the battlefield and shoot things all over the place. There are some notable exceptions that we've seen lately in Alpha League. Creeper, for instance, is playing a Craft World list, which wiped out and nearly tabled a Dark Angels list, and won as a result. But it still couldn't stop Stubborn Defiance. Even with 2 Lynxes and everything, it still couldn't stop it.
We had Curie relying on like his psychic power to stop me from stopping it as well, like every turn. So if he'd have like failed that, then I'd have just stolen the objective from him as well.
Right. But he did manage to do it. Like,
yeah, I know, but I'm saying it's like there are instances where you can actually play around this. It's great to just like QQ and whine that it's like too powerful, but there is actually like counterplay that you can do against Stubborn Defiance. Like out of LOS shooting, you'll get them eventually. It's only 5 guys. Maybe you force the Apothecary back, you know, to bring one back. Fair enough. You know, deep strikes are another great way because Dark Angels don't screen too well, so you can deep strike something in that can go toe to toe with the Terminators and eventually get them. I've seen Harlequins players just literally just zoom a transport up, you know, and drop like 5 troop out and contest it, and the psychic power just doesn't work at that point because they were in the transport like beforehand, you know. So there is definitely a counterplay for it.
Yeah, and it's literally, can I stop you from controlling this objective for a turn? It's not even like, can I like remove the models off of it? Can I stop you from controlling it? And there are more and more tools that are coming out to do that. We started seeing some things like that, for instance, the Reaver Lieutenant for the Space Marines that has access to Rights of War. You can just get that guy to show up and suddenly, hey, you don't have OBSEC and I do. The objective is mine. Psychomancers, I've found, are actually super helpful for this kind of play. They aren't the most offensively powerful unit that Necrons have, but I do think that they're an interesting tech piece, and the ability to turn off OBSEC from 12 inches away can be useful, especially when you got access to a Veil of Darkness. So you teleport people on there, and then suddenly, hey, you don't have OBSEC anymore. That's a problem. Drukhari have access to a variety of different things to do that as well, and yeah, we've been seeing this pop up a lot more. That said, it is really good. I don't like, you can play around it, but it's kind of like Oath of Moment, where if you don't have the army that can contest the objective, that can stop them from controlling it regularly, then at least, you know, on a turn that you need them to stop controlling it, then you're in a situation where you're better off just ignoring it entirely and letting them get their points, maybe. Because again, if they are holding 5 Terminators in the back, it's like a 200-point unit. That's 200 points that are sitting there and earning them 15 points, but that's 200 points of their army that are just not in your face, which is where they do all of their damage. So you kind of have to play the rest of the army, I think.
You can take a secondary to match it, as well. Like if you're baking like secondaries into your list too, you can kind of go, okay, so in this matchup they're going to take Stubborn Defiance. What can I take secondary wise that I can virtually guarantee myself 15 points on to match it?
Mm-hmm.
So like Harlequins, you're just going to take Engage, and should be able to get that like every turn to match
yeah,
that
by
secondary.
accident.
Sorry?
You can almost get that by accident.
Yeah. So that's one way to counterplay against it as well. Go, okay, you're going to get your 15 points. I'm going to take something that I can virtually get like 15 points on.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of how you have to play against Space Marines in general. And again, it kind of the secondary allows the army to play the way that the army should probably be played to a certain degree. It makes some sense. It works thematically at least, but it's kind of like Warzone Caradon, like we said earlier. These things aren't OP until they are, and this might be like the first one that I've seen that's like, hey, this thing's probably just like a little tweaked above what all the other ones are. Like Erever, out of all the Death Guard secondaries, are there any that you look at that go, hey, this is at least as powerful as that?
If you're playing on free objectives, like on Dawn of War, Spread the Sickness can be pretty powerful because it's in the same category as banners. The difference is you're getting 3 points per objective and it can't be knocked down. Like there's no, like as we say, like counterplay to it. As long as you are controlling that objective and there's no enemy models on it, you can get yourself, for taking D3 mortal wounds on a unit of Poxwalkers or whatever, you can get like an easy like 9 points, and then you can push out to like one objective for like 12. So that can be pretty powerful at times.
Yeah, that's like a deploy scrambler's level of reliability, which is good. Like that's the kind of secondary that you definitely want in your back pocket for at least the second pick. But it's not like 15 points. I've
done 15 a couple of times, but it can be super difficult because you're looking to get it onto like 5 objectives at that point.
Erever, are there any other objectives that you can think of off the top of your head that are like, I think this is tricky to play around, but I've found a way to, like, there are ways to play around it?
No, not really. Like the Jakari one, I've not seen it enough. Like it's basically the Necron Tail Quarters one, right?
Yeah,
like,
with an army that's 3 times as fast and twice as killy.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that one is that it competes directly with Engage in All Fronts, and Drukhari are like ridiculously good at scoring Engage in All Fronts, so a lot of times they'll just take that instead.
Especially if they're playing a more positional game, but if you're going for a killier list, that might change things. Also, without access to the old racks, it's more difficult to be durable, so they might go for more lethal things, but Trevy, you've obviously more Drukhari, so you know more what you're talking about at this point. Is there anything that you've seen, Trevy, that's popped up that's like, hey, this is actually a tough secondary in a codex that I've seen? Or
not particularly. I think the biggest upside of the of faction specific secondaries is that, like, in situations where you don't have a great choice from the core secondaries, the factions that have them just get an extra shot at having a good one. Which is a really a super big benefit to have, but I don't think any of them are particularly sort of overpowered, and they all of them require you to some extent construct your list and your strategy around them, and then sort of alter your game plan to score them, which I think is generally where secondaries should be. I do think that the downside is that a lot of factions just literally have less options for secondaries than others, and that is a problem, but I don't think that there are any secondaries in particular that are like super egregious.
Yeah, you know what the thing is that they remind me of the most? They remind me the most of the tactical objectives from 8th. So for those of you that never played Maelstrom of War, you missed out on Schemes of War. That was actually a really fun way to play. But the cards had faction-specific objectives in them, and some of them were really garbage. Others were stupidly good. But all of them were tried to be themed around what the army did. So for instance, Thousand Suns had one of the best ones in the game because all they had to do was cast powers. Just a lot of powers. And if there's one thing the Thousand Suns could do, it's cast a lot of powers. And they just got a boatload, like 9 victory points for it. But in all cases, like, they're actually kind of interesting. Like, the Tau one was just full of killing things. So I didn't have to hold objectives, I just had to kill stuff. Which is kind of what Tau do in the fluff too. So the secondaries do that as well. They give you an option to play your army in a way that is thematically fluffy, but also rewards you for it with points, which is a good way to reward people. And I think that, like Trevy, I agree, the majority of them are a strategic pick. You can't pick Oath of Moments in every game and expect to do well, particularly on things like, what was the one? There's the 6 mission, there's the 6 objective mission where it's hold 2, hold 3, and there's no objective in the middle. Picking Oath of Moment,
probably.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, picking Oath of Moment there, terrible decision. Like it's barely gonna help at all. You need to be on 3 objectives at least, and there's no objective in the middle. What are you doing? And other times it's stellar. The Scouring. If we were playing that in Alpha League, holy cow, would Oath of Moments be good in that one. You've got access to Priority Target, where it's already important to be in the middle to be able to have access to the rest of the objectives in the game. So yeah, Oath of Moment, super, super, super good. And besides, there's a variety of other secondaries that are already really good for what they do, and you can build your list around them. While We Stand, We Fight is a particularly interesting one that scores you 15 points pretty much right from the get-go of the game, and it's up to your opponent to remove the units that are scoring you those points. No one really complains about that one right now. So, despite the fact that it's 15 points as long as you play well, or as long as you play cagely with those units. It just happens to be the units that you probably are using the most, which is where I think it becomes a trap, and it becomes an interesting choice, and so on and so forth. So, yeah. On that topic, actually, is there actually like a core secondary that you guys think is probably still a bit too strong right now? Because I remember at the beginning of the edition, Abhor the Witch was way too good for what it did. Nowadays, I rarely see it being picked at all. So are there any like core secondaries that pop up as being egregious, ever?
I mean, some things feel strong still. Like, I keep going on about it, but Harlequins with light engage, for example, just feels like you're that fast, you're just gonna get this, like, no matter what, and there's not like a whole lot I can really do about it. To be honest, so you just kind of have to go into that matchup expecting them to take that like 9 games out of 10, and just going, yep, that's fine. But then again, by the same token, like you mentioned the Scouring, with like your sort of like Death Guard, like Terminator builds, and like Dark Angels Terminator builds, that the Mission Pacific there can like hold the center, can feel really oppressive as well, because they've got these big tanky elite infantry that can literally just surround the objectives so you can't get on it.
Yeah.
And then you have to literally like shoot and fight your way through like 15 to 20 Terminators to get it. So that can feel a bit oppressive as well.
So maybe the scariest part about these secondaries is not the secondaries themselves, but the fact that you can definitely stack them with some of the mission secondaries. And I think that the mission secondaries are interesting for what they do as well. But yeah, I see your point. Definitely, especially with Direct Assault and Oath of Moment, like that is a nasty, really strong combo that practically scores 15 points on, like 30 points on its own.
Yeah, you take Direct Assault and Oath and Engage, right, and then you just you hope you never lose.
Yeah, at that point, all you need to do is sit on 2
domination.
objectives, and you're only
Domination.
5 points off of winning 100
Yeah.
points. Like, yeah, it's super, super good. Okay, so yeah, I think that the general idea then, and I'm probably talking too much, but you two cut in if I'm talking spewing nothing. The primary thing that you need to think of when you're dealing with secondaries is, can I actually deal with it? And if you can't, what can I do other than deal with that? Like, what are your other options? Because if someone's got Oath of Moment and they're taking the center, and you can't take the center from them, then it's best not to throw resources at that and instead go after everything else. Which has been a time-honored tradition ever since Knights existed as well. Like, don't kill the Knights, kill the OBSEC. Although killing the Knights is a great thing if you can. So, yeah, definitely, like, when you're playing against hard secondaries to play against, think creatively, think outside of the box a bit, and take a minute and breathe. It might be just as simple as, you know what, I'm going to go for the flanks instead of going for the center. Building your army to be that kind of flexible, I think, is just a good way to build a event-winning army as compared to, something that skews really hard and doesn't have those kinds of options. Yeah, and we've definitely talked about secondaries before, chat. So we have a lot of people talking about, building your list around a secondary. This is absolutely true. That really does help. But even then, think outside the box. Don't always pick While We Stand, We Fight, because sometimes you're going to need those Terminators, Dark Angels players, to actually do stuff. You don't want them to die.
Yeah.
And if you're afraid of throwing your Terminators to the wolves, then like you're gonna do less with your army than you need to do to be able to defeat the army you're with. So yeah, be creative, folks, and think outside the box. Do not be stuck. I think that's the best piece of advice I can give for secondaries. Okay, unless if there's anything else to add, we can continue on to the next bit for today. We've got some win-loss analysis. So Alpha League right now has been going on for 2 out of 3 of its weeks. We're into season 7 here, and we've got some interesting stats to show and to discuss and to talk about. And no doubt, I will probably talk way too much about everything because as is my want. I seem to be very good at doing that. So let's go ahead and take a look. Zoop. We're currently looking right now at a table full of a bunch of stuff, and I'm happy to say that I at least have contributed positively to my faction this week. So we've got. Let's go ahead and start off with Imperium. So Imperium overall, we've got 60 wins, 46 losses for a win rate of 56.6, and we've got 60% of our games total played. So this is actually starting to be fairly indicative of where they're sitting. Look, it's no secret, the vast majority of these games are being won by Imperial Soup on a 3-to-1 ratio. It's 23 wins to 7 losses for this, a 76% win rate for Imperial Soup. A lot of these lists vary in terms of what they bring, but there are some general trends. Adeptus Sororitas sitting at 5-3, Adeptus Custodes at 18-13. They're still both positive win rates. Adeptus Mechanicus 7-9, considering they won last season. That's always a fun one to see. Astra Militarum at 6-8, Grey Knights 0-5, the poor guys, and Imperial Knights are actually 1-1. Good job, guys, or guy, singular. So right now we have 11 lists with Imperial Soup, and they've gone 23-7, which is an insane number. Insane number. A 3-to-1 win ratio is definitely above balanced by like almost 20%. There are a couple of lists that we've seen that work with this. There are lists that mix Sororitas with the Custodes, with the shield wall kind of idea. We've got Megara lists that bring along somebody else to help out with the Knights. We've got Astra Militarum being spiced in just to get the double full payload Manticores, which are really, really good for what they do for their cost. And tank commanders with double shooting. Demolisher cannons should not be left at the wayside either. There's a lot here with Imperial Soup that still really, really works. And it works really well into a meta where we're seeing a bunch of Marines because, they're just not as flexible. Trevy, have you been seeing something very similar with your stuff?
With Imperium Soup being popular, you mean?
Yeah, like how well have Imperial Soup been doing in like T5S2, for instance?
Yeah, so I don't have any hard numbers for you, but generally speaking, I think one of the most interesting things about Imperium Soup is that the players who are taking it competitively are usually like people who know what they're doing. Like nobody like rocks up, to their local game store and is like, I'd like to get into 40K. You know what I really want to play? A mix of Deathcore of Krieg with 1 detachment of AdMech and 15 Retributors. That's really what I'm excited to play. Like the people who are enfranchised enough to dive into a mixed list like that are already pretty competitively minded. So they tend to be on the higher
Pony
skill
Island. How did I forget about the Deathcore of Krieg ponies? Oh no.
So I think that's a big reason that Imperium Soup lists tend to be very good. Is like the people who play them know what they're doing, and they're good at playing Imperium Soup. It's also very flexible. Like calling an army Imperium Soup, it could be so many different things. Like there could be Custodes in there could be Space Marines in there, it could be the ponies, like it could be Adeptus Sororitas, it could be the Knights plus AdMech list that we're seeing right now. So it's hard to make any sort of sweeping generalizations about the strength of the quote unquote faction, because it's actually like 10 factions all rolled into one. So,
which I guess,
but it doesn't surprise me at all that they're doing well, because we are seeing some really cool innovations coming out of Imperium players over the last couple of weeks.
For sure, and I guess one of the things that makes this even more remarkable, like chat notices, yes, it's not a massive subset of games. But 30 games is pretty close to that 50 mark where most online ELOs are like, yeah, this is a good place for you. And despite that, like the win rate's insane. Like there's a variety of different methods of making an Imperial Soup list, and most of them are doing super well. So yeah, like good job Imperial Soup players. And yeah, I agree with Trevy. It makes sense that it would be because of, you know, part of it's definitely player skill. The players that are playing it know what they're doing. But you know, I gotta say that part of it's because like there are definitely some very strong pieces in those lists that do really, really well. Like there are powerful bits that you can use. But you do have to know how to use them. I don't think it's as easy as say Chaos Soup's ability to just be like, I've got Morty, I've got Warp Time, Morty time. It's definitely a little bit more. It's definitely a little bit tougher, I think, to make it work quite as well because a lot of those units can be flimsy depending. Okay, Space Marines. We're looking at a less than 50% win rate, which is like the first time since the edition dropped. Space Marines have been the terror for 2 years. They have been nuts since August of 2019. God, it feels like it was 10 years ago. And like they've been like the top of the meta in some way, shape, or form ever since. So let's take a look at what's happening here. Space Marine Soup, the one player who's playing it, has gone 1-3. But like a good run for you. Way to go, making Space Marine Soup work for at least one of your games. Blood Angels, who we saw an uptick in because they got their new book for Alpha League Season 7, they got to use it, are 10-6 currently, so that's like a solid win rate for them. Again, not a representative number of games, but like that's good to see, considering that they were languishing last season. Black Templars are 1-4 with the two lists that have been playing it. Odd, but not unsurprising, I guess. If you know how to play Black Templars, they have some incredible tech. I like them a lot, but yeah, for sure. There are 12 lists playing Dark Angels. They are still going 53%. So even if you're good or bad or whatever, Dark Angels seem to be a really standard pick that go, hey, I played this and it's fine. Deathwatch are 0-1. We saw that one game. No, we saw a different game where it was an Imperial Soup list with Deathwatch in it. So, you know, that's the thing. But Deathwatch currently are at the bottom of the heap as far, almost the bottom of the heap. The Imperial Fists currently have no one playing them, so I think that's the bottom of the heap. But Deathwatch are currently not doing super great on their own. Iron Hands currently 1-5 with 3 lists being played. Raven Guard 1-2. Salamanders 2-5. Space Wolves 2-8. Ultramarines 0-2. And White Scars 4-3. By far the most populous of these are the Dark Angels, followed closely by by Space Wolves and Blood Angels. So like the 3 newest books. And they're almost all doing okay. I'm looking at the Space Wolves. I'm sad. 2-8. Poor boys. You are good doggos. So Dark Angels, I don't think it's surprising. I think that a lot of people that are playing Dark Angels right now are still experiencing a shift within their own book as well, where a lot of people are going, hey, maybe the the Deathwing isn't the only way to play this, and maybe even Raven Wing's more competitive. Blood Angels are managing to put in their numbers and doing well. I can't wait to see some games with them on stream. That would be really, really cool. And yeah, overall, this doesn't surprise me all that much. It turns out that Space Marines are the top of the meta, means everybody's tooled to deal with Space Marines. And a lot of the tools that Space Marines had to deal with everybody else, I mean, are now starting to not be the most powerful tools in the game. We've got more books coming out. We've got Death Guard with their flat damage reduction, so the Space Marines are no longer the tankiest in the game. You know, they don't have the same flexibility as Death Guard do either, with their access to Poxwalkers as well as elite units. So, yeah, the Space Marines are still doing fine overall, but a 42% win rate is obviously not indicative of a super healthy win rate at the moment. Maybe their time in the sun will come back when people aren't trying to smash them up all the time, would be my feeling here.
I think Space Marines do get sort of dragged down by the fact that they're one of the most popular factions as well.
For sure, yeah.
Like, just given the fact that like so many people play them, right? So you tend to have kind of an average amount of play skill in the community of people playing. Some of the stuff that surprises me is like Space Wolves doing so poorly. I think that the people who are really good at Space Wolves tend to stick with Space Wolves, you know, sort of through thick and thin.
Yeah, they're diehard fans at that point, for sure.
Yeah, but you know, then like the people who are really good at them also like win a lot of games. So I hate to tell it to you. I hate to break it to you, Space Wolves players. Your sub faction isn't bad. It might be a user error kind of issue.
Ooh, shots fired.
Yeah.
So go ahead, sir.
Go ahead, Trevy.
Well, I think that there's a lot of Space Marine chapters that are similar to that. Like Iron Hands is another one that I think has some really powerful tools that we've seen do really well, but that I don't think people have quite unlocked yet. And especially sort of Iron Hand successor lists are actually really scary and don't see a lot of wider play. But other than that, it's not super surprising to me that like White Scars is doing pretty okay. And that some of the slower, less flexible chapters like Salamanders and would be sort of falling by the wayside a little bit.
Yeah, fair enough. And also a lot of the ones that aren't doing super great with here have older supplements. I know that Iron Hand successors can do well. For sure. Raven Guard can do like their one-trick pony really well, so long as they're a successor chapter. Salamanders used to be like the all-rounder go-to faction, but they just don't have the same tools as some of the newer books to do better jobs, I guess, with them. And they're certainly not White Scars, which just the flat 2 damage is really, really solid into anything but Death Guard. So
yeah, good Salamanders lists are also very slow, and that's a big downside. Like you can just run into missions that are bad for you, and then if your move 5 aggressors like can't get to the objective fast enough, like, oh well.
Yeah, it's like that's a big Sag at that point for sure. Okay, let's move on to Chaos now. Space Marines, because they're usually a beginner faction. Yeah, we can definitely attribute some of that to like the players playing them. They're newer. They're making some pretty they might make a big blunder against an opponent that can capitalize on it, and that changes the game entirely. Chaos tends to be played by one of two people: diehard fans that are just there for the fun, and they it's complicated and they just play and like whatever, it's difficult, or people that really know what they're doing. And it's that second category that comes up with the grotesque stuff that you can see. So let's go ahead and take a look here. Chaos Soup is arguably the best way to make them work. They're currently sitting at a 7-10 record, but from what we've seen, they are by no means like repping that 41% win rate across the entire board. There are some people, Demon Forged, for instance, in our last stream game, did extremely well. With a Warp Time Maggie list with Big Bird attached to it. So, like, if you thought it was hard to kill one of those things, now imagine 2. There are 2 of them. You have Chaos Demons that are currently sitting at 7-5. Death Guard, like, obviously popular, but on top of being popular, doing well. 17-10, 62, almost 63% win rate for an army that it probably has a lot of people that are just jumping in and like, I want to play Death Guard now. They might be new, they might be experienced, but either way, they're still doing well. Thousand Suns, sorry boys, you're down here with the Tau if you're a mono faction, so there you are at 0-2. All Chaos Space Marines are going 2-3, so just if you're playing Chaos Space Marines as an undivided whole, hey, at least you're doing something. The one guy playing Alpha Legion, you go, my dude. We reviewed your lists last time we did this podcast, and I was rooting for you. 0-3, but like I do think that your list has some pretty cool stuff. And Emperor's Children going 2-0, and I think that might be the only mono Chaos Space Marine faction that has like a really big strong thing going for them, but even then it's still better in Soup, I think, is a good way of putting it. And that thing I'm talking about happens to be the Emperor's Children Terminators alongside Noise Marines. Those 2 things, plus the fact that they fight first and they work really well with Slanesh demons and stuff like that, tends to be what Emperor's Children are playing with most of the time. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, noisy boys are badass.
Noisy boys are badass is about right.
Death Guard carrying the win rate for the majority, and Chaos Demons. So yeah,
that seems fair. There are a lot of good Death Guard players, but there are also a number of Death Guard players who aren't doing like stellarly.
I mean, it was a new book, right? So a lot of people had a lot of like thoughts on what to run, and no 2 Death Guard lists like in Alpha League are like a cookie cutter list right now.
Yeah,
they're all like super different, doing different things. There's some running Mortarion, there's some not running Mortarion, there's some that are running the Light Lords over Death Shroud. There's all kinds of like differences and tweaks and things like that.
Yeah, so there's no one list for Death Guard, and there's no one player for them either. Which, like, honestly, that's probably fine. And it shows that there is a variety of player skill within that one faction in the league, which is great. And they're still doing really well. Like, 63% is way above what you'd expect out of a completely like out of a huge subset of games. If somebody sits at a 63%, that's like, oh, that's Castellan Knights. It's not Inari, but you know, it's pretty dang good. So I think that about says that we need what we need to out of this. There are a variety, although the Chaos Soup bears an additional little mention here. Chaos Soup tends to show up in a variety of different places. It is difficult to play because there are so many different books, so many different rules, interactions, and everything going together. And I think that's why people who play Chaos Soup like it.
I think the Chaos Soup list that is carrying that statistic for the majority is Mortarion plus Warp Time.
100%. Yeah. Mind you, I did play against the list today that I think that could kill Mortarion. In one turn, that was also a Chaos Soup that had zero use of that. I played against Devin Swan earlier today, and he had a triple Soulburster Petard list, and it really just rocked my world. The number of mortal wounds was insane. But, like, that's the thing. Chaos Soup has a bunch of variety, and although you can see a variety of different pieces pop up in different lists, Warp Time, certain demon engines, like, or, like, even specific units like Big Bird and Mortarion and Magnus, they do have a lot of variety and different playstyles, and they all rely on a variety of different difficult to organize orders of events. So I think that if you're playing Chaos Soup right now, the most important thing you can do right now is make a spreadsheet and very specifically write down in what order you do everything. The number of people I've seen who just forget the Cascades of Fate and then forget that they then also have the die reroll is hilarious. So yeah, Chaos Soup definitely has some teeth, but it is difficult to play, and that would explain their win rate, but also explains, you know, their win rate. They have 7 wins still, despite the fact that they're difficult to play. So it's obviously, you know, still good. Eldari currently sitting at an overall 60% win rate. There aren't a whole lot of lists, a total of 7, 8, 12 of them. Yikes. That said, they've been doing okay. 18 to 12 overall. Eldari Soup carrying it so far with 2 of the lists, going 3-0 currently. They still need to play their games. Wags finger. Harlequins going 8-4 so far. Harlequins still proving to be like a solid army at all times in 9th edition. They are just really, really good. Drukhari, they don't have access to their new book yet, so the one brave soul who's playing them is currently going 2-0. What a badass.
He doesn't need his new book. He's that confident. He doesn't even need the new codex.
Right, exactly. Like, they still played the mission all right, and then, you know, if people like Lawrence from Tabletop Tactics or you know, Scary from Scarredcast can do well with them, then, like, you know, it's still possible with the old book, and we don't even have to say that starting next season. And then Craft Worlds, which we've seen show up on the channel at least a couple of times. Arguably one of the worst armies in the game at the moment, but they're still pulling in 5 and 8. Which is not the worst, and considering that 2 of those wins are from one person, hey, that one person, I'm Creeper, I'm looking at you, you know, there's definitely still some teeth in the Craft Worlds if you can play them properly, though I do think that they are playing an uphill battle overall. The people, obviously what's happening here is that the people that like Eldari are playing Eldari still, and they're doing their best. And it's just tough. Like, none of these are just outright, like, 0-15, where it's just, like, a bajillion lists of a bajillion people who have not done well with them because it's hard to play, and also they were the fun new faction. These people really want to play Eldari, and they really want to do well with them, and are trying their best. And the only faction that's actually doing badly in that category is Pure Craft Worlds, which makes sense considering the state of the game at the moment. Okay, unless if there's anything else to add there, because Erever, you're not an Eldar anymore. Let's move on to Xenos. So, the Tau Empire, I miss it badly. I'll be playing them next season no matter what happens, because Necrons are just not my thing. They're currently going 0-1, with a list that has 2 Ivaros without shield generators, which makes it a very high firepower, low durability army, and that's probably explaining that one. We then go on to Orcs. They're 5 and 7 right now. Necrons, 4 and 5. We've got Tyranids, 8 and 11, and Genestealer cults are 1 and 2. None of these are above a 50%, which is frustrating to me,
Big
I
oof.
guess. Sorry, go ahead, Trevy.
That's a big oof.
Yeah, huge oof. Oof size large. Orcs in particular have some interesting stuff going on right now. Joko played Buggies. What was it, last night actually, in a fairly long stream, but it was a really fun Orc Buggies list that actually ended up winning. It was a good time, but that, you know, that's not everybody, and Orcs are relatively hard to play. Tau are like hard mode. If you really want to play like the Dark Souls of 40k right now, try playing Tau and winning. It is not easy. Necrons currently 4 and 5. I think that the 4 Necron lists that are still around are trying to work with the codex that is difficult to deal with when your 20-man warrior blobs have been targeted and you are kind of forced to start looking in other places. In my case, I know that I ended up going for a list that was mentioned on the Art of War podcast. One of Richard Siegler's students, I keep forgetting his name, sadly, but he ended up coming up with a list that was like 2 squads of Night Scarabs, 3 squads of Wraiths, and just a whole bunch of flying object that went around all over the place and just played the objective. And it's not like brand new, but like the style of list that it is, seems to do okay. But you're looking for that, triple Catans, a new list that came out with like vehicles, and doing like the Annihilation Barge, spam them army. Yeah, there we go. So there's that going on, and Necron players, there's only only the 4 lists. Obviously we still have some more games to play, so let's get up to those 16 games. We've only got 9. We got 7 more left to play, folks. Tyranids, currently 8 and 11. Tyranids are hard. I think Trevy can agree to that. They're not a plug and play army, especially with the lists that are doing well right now, which are some variation of usually 2 Demacarons, an Exocrine, and then other stuff to work around it. Is there anything in particular that you would say about Tyranids and Genestealer cults in general right now, Trevy?
I think there's like a big prevalence of Dimacaron builds right now, and especially, John Lennon just won a GT with double Dimacaron in his list, and they're unfortunately putting a Dimacaron in your list you're just sort of asking for RNG to like bum you, because running like sort of relying on toughness 7 18 wound models is like right in a really good position for you lose the roll to go first and don't have perfect terrain, and you'd like lose 500 points of your army on the top of 1 to like some random meltaguns or something. I think the Tyranid lists that are more consistent probably don't play Dimacaron, so it's not shocking to me that if a lot of people are just jamming Dimacarons in their list and they're like, this is going to go well, then they're not losing, or they're not winning particularly reliably. Like that's not super surprising, to be honest. Tyranids are they're in an awkward situation, an awkward spot right now. They're good against the top stuff in the metagame, but there's like some Death Guard builds, and once new Drukhari come out, there's some other builds in there that are really tough for them. And that's going to hurt them quite a bit. I do think that they're at a position to be like in a pretty good spot if you're looking at playing against a lot of, especially like Sororitas and Harlequins and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. They're very favored in those matchups. But if you're looking at a ton of Imperial Soup and Death Guard, I can see it being rough. Yeah.
So after looking at all of these, there's a picture that's kind of emerging from this right now. Are there any stats in particular that surprised either two of you? Let's start with Erever, because he hasn't had a chance to talk. Like, I haven't got him to talk recently.
How was that? Right, so the stats, I'm just going to jump back to Space Marines because I wanted to say one thing there.
Please do.
Obviously I did a lot of list checking before the start, and it seemed a lot of Space Marine lists had not adapted. Like, they were still running these big blobs of Vanguard vets with lightning claws. They were still relying on chaplains, chapter master, the inceptors. Nothing had changed from season 6 to season 7 in terms of list building at all, which kind of surprised me. I figured because the amount of Primaris stuff out there gives you a really big toolbox to play with. So you've definitely got scope for playing towards the meta and changing your list up, and not one of these cookie cutter sort of lists that did super well season 5, season 6 had not changed when all of a sudden there's damage reduction 1, free wound 4 up involved Terminators running around, or just wound you on 4 plus Terminators running around, both of which are reducing damage by 1, and it doesn't seem like any Space Marine player really adapts to that. And I think because there is a lot of Dark Angels out there, and there's a lot of Death Guard out there, plus Mortarion as well, doesn't seem like they've adapted at all, and I think that's showing in the numbers.
Trevy, compared to what you've seen so far in all your streams, and you do a lot of game casting and game playing yourself, is there anything that springs out to you about this, or does this seem kind of par for the course from what you've seen?
What is this Blood Angels number? Where did that come from? 10 and 6? What?
So wait, why does that surprise you so much? What's happening out in the broader world of TTS that you've seen so far?
No one is playing Blood Angels, let alone winning with them. That's
Oof.
shocking.
Oof.
It's like if you had White Scars, but you didn't threat as far, and that's it. That's what you have. You're just slow White Scars. That's wild.
Oh, maybe that's just people not used to the in Alpha League that are used to the book. Are Blood Angels particularly player friendly? Like to play? Like, are they easy to play?
I mean, I imagine that they're pretty straightforward. Like you move forward and then you charge, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're doing. But I mean, they're mostly just Space Marines. They do Space Marine things, and they have some interesting. Like I think that like Sanguinary Guard are sort of like marginally more efficient than Vanguard veterans, if I remember correctly. Like when it comes down to dealing damage. But yeah, I haven't seen Blood Angels do well anywhere.
So a couple comments from chat. Statistic really describes local players rather than the broader meta. Agreed. These are definitely the Alpha League players for the most part. And when you've got, 12 Eldari lists, 20 Xenos lists, 26 Chaos lists, but 41 Imperium and 41 Space Marines, so like 82, fully more than half of the entire area is just Imperial in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, it definitely shows that it's more of a local players than broader meta sort of thing here. Blood Angels by A.T. Valdor says, Blood Angels are good against bad players.
Oof.
Faucini agrees, BR good versus people that are bad.
Spitting some fire over there, Valdor.
The pants, ABCs. If you know your ABCs, you can play Blood Angels or always be charging.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so that seems to explain it.
Do
it. So yeah, no, it seems like chat's in agreement. Look, these win-loss rates aren't too surprising in some cases, in most cases, but Blood Angels being up that high, like, congrats you guys. Maybe you know the secret sauce before the rest of the world does. Who knows? Okay, but we'll have to see, because again, these are just the group stages. The real sauce comes when we get to the playoffs. And when all your games are done, specifically, your games. That's right, I'm talking to you. Finish your games. You got a week. So, let's move right along. We've got some lists to take a look at today. And some of these lists come from previous weeks. Some of these lists are brand new to us today. For starters, let's go ahead and take a look at this first list, which we could not find. Excuse me. Please find that list. That would be important to me. There we go. We found it. So this first list is by Orion. You tell me. It's got a super heavy detachment to start things off. Question Mechanicus, with the House Raven choice. We've got a bunch of Armored Warglaves, a Castellan, a bunch of Knight Moraxis with Lightning Glocks, and then a Questeros Knight Megara. It is very short and simple. It is pure Knights. There are lots of Armigers running around, one Castellan and one Knight Megara for all your big stuff effectively, and making the best use of Forge World for your with the Knight Moraxes themselves. And then being House Raven, I think just gives them really good firepower for a turn if you need it. I don't remember exactly, but that's a thing. So 404 is my favorite list. Soulwolf instantly hates it. Shush pants. So this list is interesting because it's all Knights. However, all Knights tend to do badly. Is there anything in this list right now that stands out to either of you two? Erever?
Just the Knight Megara list that he's running. Yeah, I've played against this.
It says soup is bad. Is the title?
Yeah. So he's being pure. He doesn't want any Imperial Guard. He doesn't want Admech. He just wants to bring a load of Knights and stomp over your face. Bring that whole sort of like gatekeeper mentality back to 40k. And yeah, there's a lot of Dacker in here. The Megara is something that we've seen crop up a few times, and if you can't deal with it, then it's a big problem.
It will wipe your army given enough time.
I love the inclusion here of the Castellan as well, especially with the Shieldbreaker missile. Just like screw your invul, like is fantastic. I think, but I think it does suffer. Like, sure, you don't want to play soup. but you're not really holding objectives too well. You're just putting a knight on an objective and hoping that nothing comes near it to like one-up set models to like steal it off you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an issue for sure. But yeah, fair play. You know, if you want to just play a bunch of big robots and have some fun, sure.
Yeah, and like in all kudos here, the thing that I find interesting is that a lot of knights lists you see online that people play in videos, like in casual videos and stuff, have like 3 Questoris knights or 4 Questoris knights and like nothing else, and then you have like the 3 Questoris knights with a couple of Warglaves list. There was one game I saw where somebody brought 14 Warglaves, which is a lot of Warglaves, and at the end of the game, I was like, okay, so not too many of them died, and as much as it's a spam list, it certainly did the trick. This is a much more balanced knight list than I think I would initially expect. The Knight Castellan and the Questoris Knights obviously need to be hit in turn 1, but if you lose a Warglaive here or there, that's not the end of the world. And so long as your Castellan gets one good turn of shooting, and your Knight Megara can like back that up as your front line, like this works. You do have a decent amount of board control for somebody if you don't have like enough anti-tank to deal with the Warglaives or the Moraxes. And yeah, no, like this list would give me some trouble for sure. It's got a lot of power in it, and it's got enough defense that it is difficult to deal with unless if you have enough anti-tank or enough ways to deal with this kind of stuff. So detachments wise, chat, by the way, there's just the one. So it's fine. You can't legally take 14 Warglaives, max 9. I think there's a way to do it. So yeah, if you take like the 3 squads of Armored Warglaives, each with 3 in them, and then you take the 3 Knights Moraxes, I think that gets you up to 12. I don't know exactly what the list was, but it was close to 14. It was a lot. I like the list. I think it's really cool. I think it does what Knights want to do. I still hate it because it's Knights. I want to build a Knights list one day so I can learn to love them, but as it stands right now, Knights are just they are a really big gatekeeper list, and that's maybe the only thing that's dragging this thing down is if somebody has an answer to this that's really like effective. Like if they can burn down the Castellan or the Megara in one turn and then still have enough firepower after the retaliation to start dealing with these toughness 7 12 wound models, like yeah, the list falls apart. it definitely would fall apart at that point. Malice in the chat brings up Death Shrouds. Yeah, Death Shrouds could potentially do some stuff if they get into melee, and the fact that they can hide behind terrain and not get shot definitely helps there. Okay, unless if there's anything else anybody wants to bring up, we can go on to the next list here by Mithras. So, Mithras here brings up a paste bin list that will eventually load, hopefully someday. In the meantime, you can look at all these fancy flowers and the number of the number of gigabytes that I've saved by using Brave. Hashtag not sponsored.
So yeah, we're proving in action right now why you should never use paste bin PL.
You know what? If this is going to continue to load this way, hold on a second. Let's move on. While that's loading, let's take a look at Tussle. Tussle's list here. Boop. Much faster. So, this is called the Scutum Ambrosum Imperatoris. Ooh, very cool. I love the fake Latin. Terrain beats that army, or sisters. That's fair. That's fair. Shuma Games actually brings up a good point about the Supa's bad list. Terrain beats the army, or sisters. Fair enough. Fair enough. Real Latin, maybe? That's a fair point. It's a fair point. For this new list. So, new list. This one's by Tussle, so thank you, Tussle, for this list submission. Let's go ahead and start off with our first attachment. It's a patrol detachment for Adeptus Custodes. These guys are the Shadow Keepers. As I've now learned over many repetitions, the Shadow Keepers are the ones that can reduce the strength of people that are shooting into you. We got a Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle Jetbike. Does it have a Misericordia? Yes. Does it have a Salvo Launcher? Yes. Does it have the Captain Commander? Yes. Does it have the Unstoppable Creation, Superior Creation? Yes. So, it also has the Auric Aquilus as well. So, pretty standard loadout. A little bit of CP farm. It gets extra Warlord traits, all that stuff. It hits like a truck. Why not? We got the Custodian Guard. 2 with Storm Shields, 1 with Guardian Spear. These guys hold the backfield objective and do not let it go. You put a ring on this one. Then you got the Aquilin Custodians. Lastrum Stormbolters and Power Gauntlets on each of them. There's 4 of them. These guys hit like a truck. They shoot like a truck. They're pretty great. Although, now that I think about it, how many trucks do you have that shoot? I'm not sure. I'd have to go to the southern United States. Then you got 1 Vixillus Praetor. with the Vexilla Magnifica for the -1 to be hit. Solid way to defend your stuff. You have a bunch of Venatari Custodians. These guys have kinetic destroyers and Tarsus bucklers. The Venatari, are these the bikes or the backpack guys? I keep forgetting.
The backpack guys.
Thank you. Okay, so these are the backpack
Bikes
guys, the
are
Virtus
Virtus
Praetors.
Praetors.
Yeah, thank you, Trevy. So you have a bunch of those. They move fast. The Virtus Praetors also move fast, hit like a truck. And then you have a Telemon Heavy Dreadnought. Then you have another patrol detachment. These guys are the shield host of the Aquilin Shield. I don't even know what that does. You have Captain General Treasure Valoris that's sitting there. Another Custodian Guard squad, but this one with triple spears. And then 2 squads of prosecutors. These are the Sisters of Silence. They're cheap, cheerful, and can do your infantry secondaries. And I like them, actually. They've been popping up in a lot more Custodes lists. And they seem to work pretty well for what they need to do. So, what does the Aquilin Shield do? Because that's a piece of tech I haven't seen. Does anyone know? Bueller? Okay, so yeah, I figured. Like, this is one of those things where it's like, oh, what does this one do again? Because all you hear.
He'll tell us. He's in the chat. He can tell us. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Shield of Honor, access to Strat. What does Shield of Honor do, though? Is my question. And the reason why I bring this up is because, unlike Shadowkeepers and the Dread Host, where we know what they do because they keep popping up all the time, bodyguards for characters take all the hits, even in a fight. Ooh, that is cool. Mind you, it's the less tanky of the 2 Custodian Guard squads that's doing that, but that is pretty cool. And allows you to do a lot of extra defense against one dude for a character. Which, I mean, you do have Captain General Treasure Valoris and a Dawn Eagle jet bike and the Vixilus Praetor that are currently all characters and that are sitting in that list and need the protection. So that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, Valoris is a Wowie stand in that list, right? So you don't want him to.
That's a good point.
Get burnt.
Yeah. And let's see. The Virtus Praetors, the Venatari Custodians. No, he's not. I don't think. Yeah, between the Aquilin Custodians. Yeah, between the Aquilin Custodians, the Venatari Custodians, and the Virtus Praetors.
Yes.
Just
kidding.
Just kidding. And not even the Virtus Praetors. Sorry, the Telemon Heavy Dreadnought. You have some really heavy while we stand, we fight targets. Yeah. Okay. So, I like this idea of having a squad that like just protects everything, and then 2 other units that are there to do infantry secondaries. I think that works. And then the rest of the list is just what Custodians do best, which is big, heavy hitting, hard to kill units that walk up into your face and murder the crap out of you. Telemon Heavy Dreadnought in this particular area says super, super high. I dealt with these in a game previously. Protocultures, you had 3 of these in a list, and it was horrifying. These guys do the business. They're especially good against Death Guard because a lot of their stuff is just damage 1. So all the damage reduction in the world doesn't help against them either.
Yeah. I guess, interestingly, the Shield of Honor doesn't require the character being protected to be Aquilin Shield. So you can protect the Dawn Eagle Jetbike guy in case he ever gets low. Yeah. So, like, there's always a situation where, like, that dude eats some smites and, like, it takes, like, one shot goes through the 3+ invulnerable, and he's like, oh, I'm almost dead. And then these 3 Custodian guards are like, no, buddy.
We will save
survive.
You. Yeah. And that would make it really frustrating because at that point your opponent's probably overcommitted, and then you just got another hammer to bring in, upside the side of their head. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that dude's annoying too. Just like, I mean, the shield captain is sick, but he's he's obsac and like basically impossible to kill. So he just runs around on your objectives, and if you can't get rid of him, sometimes he just blocks your primary for the whole game. That breaks all your banners. Is like, yeah,
that hurts.
Just sad.
The one time you'll ever see cut off the head, like,
and you can't even do that anymore. This list goes no. Oh, that's excellent. Okay, let's see if the other list brought it up. Nope, service unavailable. Sorry, Mithras. I'll try to reload your list.
I can get another. It's fine. I can get
I'll try to reload it. But while we're at it, let's move on to the next one then.
I have it up. I could read it to you if you want.
Oh my god. I mean, you absolutely could, but then no one on the stream is going to be able to read it.
Actually, will it work if I PM it to you?
maybe, but I'm happy to move on to the next one just in case. For now, and then we'll go back to Mithra's after this. So this one's King Bella of Hungary. He's in my pod, so at this point, if anybody wants to help me win, I'm down. But yeah, I played against him before. Really smart player, knows exactly what they're doing under most circumstances, all circumstances. I don't know, I'm too stupid to tell. So in this case, to start things off, it seems like it's an Imperial soup. Yeah, absolutely it is. It's got sisters, it's got Admech, it's got ponies. Let's take a look. So starting things off, we got a Forge World Lucius choice here. Lucius, I can't remember what it does off the top of my head. But it's got the Solar Flare Relic, which is the reason I'm guessing why it was picked. We got a Tech Priest Dominus. They are the Warlord. They've got the Solar Flare. If someone can go ahead and just...
Lucius is ignore AP1.
Oh, that makes them tanky, and that's where it comes up. So at this point, you got 3 squads of Vanguard, 5 men each. Cheap and cheerful. One actually at 6, I guess, for points. And then you have 3 squads of Cerberus Raiders with 9 Raiders apiece. So 27 doggos. That is a lot. I'm not happy to see that. That is a lot of wounds to go through. Moving right along, we got another detachment here. This is the Death Corps of Krieg. It is what seems to be a Outrider detachment. Surprise, surprise. The Death Rider Command Squadron has hold on, where's the HQ? Oh, that's down there. I see. It's no force organization slot because
one comes in for free because it's a command squad. Yeah, so it's a total of 3 command squads and 3 standard squads.
Yeah, and that's currently what we're looking at right now. We've got the 1 free command squad. We got the Death Rider Squadron Commander with the Kurov's Aquila, so CP regeneration for every CP your opponents use. You got an Engineer Squad that just, I mean, it goes into your back line and drops scramblers real easy. It's really good at doing that for free, pretty much. And then just a bajillion ponies. So many ponies. Everything's on ponies or dogs that are made out of robots. Then we move on to the next one. It's Junie. She's back again. Check it out. She's got a squad of Val Sisters, a Hospitaller, and then 2 full squads of Retributors with multi-meltas. This list slaps. This is by King Bella of Hungary, or Matt McVie.
AKA Horseboy, because he actually changed his name.
Yeah. Yeah, there we go.
AKA Lord Solar is his Discord.
So yeah, this list.
Oh, this is Lord Solar. Okay, it all comes together.
Yeah, right. This list sucks. In the sense that you never want to play against something like this. It is really, really good.
That's what my nightmares are made of.
Pretty much, yeah. Like effectively, it swamps the board with a bunch of 3 wound models that are ridiculously fast and just keep you off the objective. That's really good in this meta right now, and particularly these Cerberus Raiders, 27 of them. This is why I like playing over the board. No one has 27 of these guys. You physically can't have them all. This thing, like, these things are unchargeable nonsense things that actually have guns that can do a little bit of damage, and they still work in melee, and they got a 6-up invuln save, and they got 3 wounds apiece, which makes them really hard to get rid of, because flat 3 damage stuff tends to not want to shoot into these weak toughness 4 or toughness 3, I forget which, models. Same goes for all these horses, which are Death Corps Krieg, so, you know...
They get the 5-up invul, right? I'm pretty sure that's like a thing for the horses, somehow.
The horses are a 6+.
The horses are, but the Cerberus Raiders maybe.
P3 with a 4+ armor save on the Cerberus Raiders, and then the Death Riders all have a 5+ damage ignore.
Yeah. Oh my God, they have a 5-up and feel no pain. I'm just trying to think about what the hell my list even does against this. Like,
yeah, I mean, the upside of playing against it is like none of it has objective secured. The goal is that it just swamps your objective secured and eventually kills it, and then you don't have any points.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, if you can attrition well enough to kill it, then you'll be fine. But if you can't, then good luck.
Right. So at this point, then we move on to the and then there's all that, and then there's this last attachment where it's like, okay, look, you can't get out of your objective, you can't get out of your deployment zone. There's too many horses. You can't charge half of them. Now here come the Retributors, and they do enough damage for the rest of the list. To put this lightly, I'm pretty sure that 8 multi-melta shots per squad, so 16 multi-melta shots at that level of accuracy, rerolling ones to hit and to wound because of Junie, is pretty damn good. They keep getting back up thanks to the Hospitaller, And if you aren't capable of wiping out a squad a turn, and let's face it, you're kind of swamped right now. It's a little difficult to do when all of your stuff is tagged.
It's also way more than 8 shots per
Right,
team,
because you have the cherubs as
also
well.
2 cherubs, yeah.
Yeah, because the cherubs add another 2 per cherub, so another 4 per squad for 1 turn. To be fair, that only lasts for 1 turn.
Yeah,
but
and fairness,
reliably,
retributors also typically only last for 1 turn.
that's a fair point, yeah.
The goal is to get their work out of them the turn they come in, and I imagine, you know, if there's anything threatening them, they're just going to strategic reserve in this list, because this list does punish screening super well, because everything's fast and can kill like light units.
Mm-hmm.
So if you run up to try to stop them, then they just blow up all your screens and come in the next turn and kill whatever they can with retributors.
Ugh. And if they last more than 1 turn ever, then these retributors will do work. Like, they are worth their money. Yeah, no, this list slaps. If King Bela of Hungary was thinking that we were going to say anything other than that, then they were very much incorrect.
I'm just going to say he's a bad person for running this list and might be
100%.
getting carded.
Yellow card. All right, so at this point, Trevy, why don't you go ahead and read out Mithras's list, please?
Sure.
Thanks.
So this list is, I think, appropriately named Leman Russ Lives. You'll be interested to learn that it is composed entirely of Astra Militarum detachments. So not the Leman Russ we were thinking of.
Right.
It is a single spearhead detachment coming out of Cadia, led by Knight Commander Pask, with looks like heavy bolters on triple heavy bolters, as well as a Punisher Gatling cannon and superior tactical training as his warlord trait. We also have a second tank commander with Kurov's Aquila and a battle cannon, plasma cannon sponsons, and a hull-mounted las cannon. 2 tech priest engine seers, which are going to be very important to repair the 7 additional Leman Russ that compose the remainder of this list. There's three squads of Leman Russ battle tanks, a total of 2 demolishers, 3 executioners, and 2 punishers, with a mix of heavy flamer and multi-melta sponsons and hull-mounted weapons, and a couple plasma cannons on the executioners. It looks like.
So is that everything?
That's the whole list.
So chat loves the list.
It's just 9 Leman Russ and 2 tech priest engine seers. Whatever. If you're gonna, I mean, like Lord Solar's list, right? If you're gonna lean into the meme, like, you gotta lean the whole way. So.
And it's not the worst meme I've ever seen. Like, at least there's a variety of weapons. The battle cannon is a little suspect, but
one thing to consider as well is that this being a spearhead detachment, every Leman Russ battle tank in it gets objective secured, so they actually fight for objectives. Okay. Assuming you can survive, which is the tough part for these guys.
I mean, it literally has more OBSEC than some Space Marine lists. So
you're not wrong,
yeah. Plus, it's like, you'd think that Leman Russes, the way that they've been talked about, they're not great. Ballistic skill 4, but like, they still have a T8, 12 wounds. Like, they're a fairly cheap tank for those kinds of stats, I guess. And when they're double firing, that's when they actually get scary. Especially if you start, like, being able to give them any kind of buffs whatsoever. Like, 40 shots from a Punisher Gatling cannon will ruin a lot. The Demolisher cannons are horrifying, particularly on tank commanders, to be fair. But if you put them on anything else, like strength 10 AP minus 3 d6 damage with 2d6 shots that tend to be averaging like a 9 or 10 shots each, is like nuts. And if you're gonna lean into the meme, like, go for it. I think that the only way that this list would be more competitive is by having more tank commanders and maybe 2 manticores, each of them with full payload, and yada yada yada. But like, the thing is, it's a fun list. Like, it's definitely leaning into the meme, leaning into the idea, and going full on with it, and it will catch some opponents off guard. I think that some people that aren't ready for this are gonna be like, oh, that does 40 shots, and you have 2.
Especially if you're like, if it sounds like the community maybe is a little bit worried about Mortarion coming and killing you. Well, a really good way to kill Mortarion is just vengeance for Cadia, that guy. Like,
which is particularly effective with, count them, 40 bullets.
There's no relic of Lost Cadia though, which is interesting.
Womp womp.
Yeah. I think that'd be a show-in too.
It'd be really funny. But like, yeah, no, I think it's great. I'd hate to play against it for some reasons, but I mean, I would want to watch that game. If you apply to be on stream, I will shove everybody else out of the way. That game gets on stream. I want to see that once.
We could get sponsorship from World of Tanks at that point, right?
Get all that sweet money in here. Okay, which brings us to our last list for today by Mini Mugs, which is on pastebin.com. Thank God. Let's go ahead and just boot up the Excel scene for that one. Whoop. So, here we are. It's a shooty Death Guard. That's what the list is called. Let's go ahead and start off with a battalion detachment. It's got the Inexorable, so these are the guys with the additional minus AP on their shots. We got Lord of Contagion. He's got Ferric Blight, Plague Reaper. Cool. Malignant Plaguecaster. He's got the Miasma Pestilence, Putrescent Vitality, Gift of Plagues, and he's got the Putrid Periapt. Benjamin Bonar from Tabletop Tactics, that's how you call it. It's the Putrid Periapt. And remember that, because he totally watches. We got the Plague Marines. We got 3 squads of them. 2 of them of 5. They have a Flail Corruption each and a Blight Launcher as well, keeping them fairly flexible, actually. And then the last one has 6, which allows them to bring a Bubotic Axe as well as the previously mentioned loadout. Actually, they all have... No, Plague Champion, Plague Marine Flail, they all have at least 6. Wow, okay, so you've built above blast on purpose multiple times. Very good. Then 2 squads of 10 Poxwalkers with improvised weapons. Then we got squad of Death Shroud Terminators, 4 plus a champion, so it's 5 there. We got another squad of 3. We have the Fetid Variants, where we have a Foul Blightspawn and a Tallyman. Of course you do. The Foul Blightspawn has your Arch Contaminator, your Revolting Stench Vats to like make the fight last and everything happen on a more regular basis. And it's, I mean, deny charge, I guess is a better way of putting it. You then bring along 2 Fetid Blow Drones. You got Flesh Mowers. You got 2 Plague Burst Crawlers. Both of them have Entropy Cannons. One has a Rot Hail Volley Gun, and the other one has a Heavy Slugger, just to keep things nice and interesting. We have that little bit of variation here. So, all things considered, like, it's a list. It's definitely the way that you'd expect Death Guard to look out of the Codex, based off of what, like, GW's like, now here's how we want the Death Guard to look. And we've got some Plague Marines, and we have some Plaguewalkers, put in some Terminators, give them some Demon Engines, and then that's the Death Guard list. I think that it is... I mean, I guess it's missing something that makes me go, ooh, that's big. I mean, 5 Death Shroud Terminators definitely hits hard. The Fetid Blow Drones definitely do what they're supposed to do. Flesh Mowers makes them really cheap and really effective for what they do. Plague Burst Crawlers with Entropy Cannons are solid. But I don't really know what else to say about this. The Plague Marines are flexible, but not good at any one thing in particular necessarily. Like, they're fine in melee, but there's 6 of them, or 7 of them, depending on which squad we're talking about. And, I mean, they're durable, but they're not that durable. They get into melee and then they do stuff. Look, yeah. Erever, you tell me, what am I missing here?
Right, so Plague Marines are interesting because they're like an expensive intercessor, because obviously you pay for like the damage reduction 1 at that point. And I think if you're using Plague Marines, you can play with them, but you need like 3 big blobs of 10 to actually like be threatening at that point, backed up by like Plague Surgeon for 6 Feel No Pain, so you're getting some additional durability using like cover mechanics, you know, to the best of your ability. So them either, you know, like touching terrain for cover save and that sort of thing. Other than that, they're just an expensive way to go and sit on a battlefield objective when you can just do that with like 10 Poxwalkers or whatever, you know. So like, sure, he's taking like flails in the unit, but are these units just gonna really, unlike 3 objectives in battlefield missions, 1 unit's just going to be stood at the back, and that flail is probably never really going to see play, which is unfortunate. You know, like I said, you can't. I think if you run like, you know, like 30, at that point you're actually getting them out the board and doing things with them, which is fine. The Blood Drones, sure, they're great. Like, they can just move forward onto an objective and then have the strat for heroic intervention. That's fine, you know, and people have to waste a lot of firepower into them too.
Mm-hmm.
I do think the contenders, though, like, it's so good, like, you know, with the Tallyman. And I think that's what the list is missing.
I'm not missing something, right? There's just no Volkite contempt.
Exactly.
No, not a one.
I'm scratching my head around. I feel like we're missing a detachment that didn't make it over or something.
That's it. And like, typically, I'd agree with you. Those Volkite Contemptors are just obnoxious. They are super good. I love the idea of the Fetid Blow Drones quite a lot, actually. They're really cheap for what they do, and they are fast, which is something that Death Guard tend to be missing. But
Yeah, if you don't have Mortarion, I think you need them for sure.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's and it is worth mentioning that I was wrong, by the way. All 3 Plague Marine squads are squads of 7.
Oh, the meme number.
The meme number.
Narrative overfunction. Yeah,
He lent into the meme. And how many units are there? There's more than 7. Forget it. But there's 7 if you just have the HQ and the troops. So, I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. Look, the list is fine. It's definitely got some flexibility, but it's missing like those power punchers, I guess. It's missing those meta units that make it immediately kind of crawl out and make it like really sting. Chat brought up a good point that the while we stand we fight targets are a squad of 5 Death Shroud Terminators, probably not going to die, and 2 Bladeberg Scrawlers, unlikely to die. And it doesn't even take up that much of the list. Like, the Death Shroud Terminators are sure 255 points, but they're worth every point. And the Plague Burst Crawlers, they can hide in the back and still be worth their points as well. I don't even know what a Raw Hail Volley Gun does compared to a Heavy Slugger, but, like, you go wild, my dude. So, like...
I have no idea why he took one Rockvale Volley. Maybe he's moving one of them up the board.
I think it's honestly he duplicated and forgot to change the gun.
Try to look for that rapid.
So yeah, that's the thing. I do think that the list has flexibility built into it. The Plague Marine squads have a blight launcher, enough bolt guns to put out some damage, especially as the inexorable, and also have enough melee to make them a threat, especially with the flails. So they can do what you need them to do. They're pitch hitters, which I do like about them. The Poxwalkers can hold those back objectives. They can spread the sickness. You don't have to spend anybody else to spread the sickness, and that's fine. The Foul Blight Spawn exists. The Tallyman exists. It's got the core there. It works fine. It's just not got that super punch.
Volkite Contenders as well.
Yeah, it does not have Volkite Contenders. It does not have Immortarion. And effectively that just says this list is not meta. And you know what? That's probably okay. You have fun, dude.
I think the downside is that like it just gets like outside once the drones are dead and you pick off like whichever unit's leading, you know, whether it's a Terminator unit or a Plague Marine unit, like you can just run circles around this list if you're faster than it, and if it's not like a hyper concentrated mission, it sort of falls into all of the weaknesses that kind of vanilla Death Guard have without teching to overcome them, and that's problematic.
Yeah, I think that if this list idea, like if you were to lean more into the Fetid Bloat drones, into the idea of having some fast moving units, I think you need more of them. Like a Demon Prince with wings, you could add some Chaos Spawn, but like something else to add to this level of threat saturation, because as it stands right now, you have wave 1, 2 turns where waves don't happen, and then you have wave 4 and 5 once the Death Shrouds finally get there, if they get there. And we've seen that there are lists that can wipe them, like that can do enough damage to actually, like, you know, seriously hurt something like this. There aren't many, but they do exist.
Yeah, and they're little Death Shroud units, right? It's not like a big 10-man coming at you.
Yeah, there's one 5-man, one 3-man. Yeah, like they're effective.
Like if they're coming at you, if they're coming at you piecemeal, like you could kill 5 Terminators. Like it takes most of your army to do it, but you can do it. You know, they're not literally unkillable.
The other thing as well is that surprised me is the Lord of Contagion over like Lord of Virulence here, because with all those bolter shots, you can turn your bolters into plague weapons or it can tap in air, and then all of a sudden you're getting like -1 AP from the Contagion, and then additional -1 AP on 6s to wound as well from Lord of Virulence.
Yeah,
so it's a great little synergy that's been missed there, I think.
I think that the only reason why the Lord of Contagion is there is to have the extra range on the Contagions. That's what he does. Does that have any additional like benefit?
Yeah, I mean, it increases by 3 inches, but there's a spell to increase it by 6 on Warcharge 6. So, you know, it's...
Which he did take. Gift of Plagues is that spell, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so that's maybe something to look at, is taking the Lord of Virulence instead. Maybe you built this off of models you had. In which case, you know what? You do you, dude. I'm with you on that front. I tend not to build lists unless if I have the models. I feel dirty this season. So... if this is built off of models that you actually have, then like, you know, well done. This would do like fine. You know, at your local game club, you could actually do well in an RTT with this, depending on who else comes by. But yeah, like the list obviously is missing some of the punch that would make it a super competitive list, but it's certainly fluffy. It fits the bill, and it works just fine. So
it sure is a Death Guard list.
It's definitely like the textbook list of what a Death Guard like. This list is the picture next to this is a Death Guard list in the dictionary, if there was a dictionary for this kind of thing. Which kind of brings us now to the end of the lists, and not the end of the stream, but and the end of the podcast, but close to. This is the Q&A section, ladies and gentlemen. And if you have any questions, well, we have a TO, an extremely experienced TO. Actually, we have two extremely experienced TOs. Now that I think about it, sorry, Trevy.
I thought I was being the unexperienced one, and I was prepared to accept that. But yeah.
No, since we have two extremely experienced TOs and one moron, it might be a good idea to ask us some questions and see what you folks think. I know that there was one question way earlier on, like near the beginning of the stream, that was talking about like what would you guys do about like what do you guys think is going to come from for chaos in Warzone Caradon. So as a result, I'd actually like to start off with that question. Erever or Trevy, either one or both, do you think that Warzone Caradon might have anything particularly cool for Chaos coming down the line soon? Or like what kind of things do you wish it would bring for Chaos?
Well, it seems like if they're going to be putting sub-faction supplements in the Warzone books, then I would expect to see that be the delivery system for Legion-specific supplements. So, I mean, I would be shocked if there wasn't at least like an Emperor's Children supplement and an Iron Warrior supplement. They've given that I think those are two of the sub-factions that have the most support. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, I wouldn't be super surprised if we didn't see some support for like World Eaters and Word Bearers and all of the other sort of big legions as well.
Okay. Diamond Boots says he has a question. As soon as he posts it, we'll go ahead and answer it. That sounds like a great plan.
Yeah. So on the chaos thing, like what I want to see out of CSM, like that was the question, right? That's new.
Yeah, that is exactly right. Like, what do you think might pop up in Warzone Caradon supplements for chaos?
I want to see more legions get more individuality. Like, they really did a good job with the Lawless chapters of doing that in 8th edition, with like amazing rules, but also like supplements as well. And I think like for like Black Legion, Iron Warriors, and all the rest of them, I think if they go to that like level of extent, it means that you're not forced into the situation as CSM where you're just trying to soup to like make a possessed bomb be insane.
Yeah.
You know, so you're just picking these little patrols of like this legion and this legion where Space Marines don't even show up. It tends to be like a character in some cultists. Mm-hmm. You know, so you don't even really feel like you're playing like CSM at that point. So I think some more individuality and greater sort of like rules focus, and obviously 2 wounds needs to come in and 3 wounds for Terminators for everyone else. I think that's pretty much a given.
That's
going to happen. But yeah, definitely more individuality for sure.
And I tend to agree with that. It'd be really cool to see more stuff like the Creations of Bile pop up, where you have like individual army ideas that can be based around certain characters, maybe like homemade characters and stuff like that, but like around certain ideas. So like a Demons Detachment thing like they had back in Vigilus, but you know, make it like really go into that. Demon engines go ham, you get extra bonuses for them, all that stuff. It'd be sick to see that kind of stuff as well. But what I would love to have the Legions have instead is like their own proper supplements. And I know that there's like a lot, or like a book that is Chaos supplements. That is all the other like Chaos Legions, where it's like, hey, here's the Chaos Space Marine book. And like, I want that thing to be thick enough to be able to cover Emperor's Children, World Eaters, all that stuff. Or just give the Chaos God specific legions like their own like big book, like Death Guard and Thousand Suns have at this point, because World Eaters and Emperor's Children practically do deserve it at this point, I think.
I mean, sure, but then you're missing out like half the other Chaos Legions.
I know.
It's not like with Space Marines, they kind of went like we're just picking like 1 or 2, right? They did like a lot of like supplements.
Yeah, it's just I think that those 4 plus the main Chaos Space Marine book and then a supplement for each of those would be really, really cool if they like fleshed out the Iron Warriors enough to have like its own supplement, fleshed out the Word Bearers to have their own supplement and stuff. That would be sick. I don't want that in a Vigilus book. I want the Vigilus book to be like interesting ideas. I want the Vigilus book to have some cool stuff, some cool bonuses, but I want those legions to have their own stuff. I think that they deserve it, and that their loyalist counterparts can't hog all the limelight. Okay, Creeper asks a meme question. Why have we not covered his list for the 3rd time already? And that's because we've covered it twice in games, Creeper. Like, come on, dude. we've put your game on stream twice. It means we've covered your list twice.
I mean, if you ask me again, The next podcast, I'm just going to spend 30 minutes ripping it to pieces. And I'm going to get Glog on here to help me.
Okay, so Alexity5217 asks to Trevy specifically, how do you think your team event's going to go? And I'm going to go ahead and add on to that. First off, sounds awesome. And second, yeah, how is that? How do you think that is going to go? And we kind of all hope it's going to go well. But Trevy, what's your answer?
Yeah, I mean, I also hope it's going to go well. I think it's going to be great. I think we got a good crew of people, and it's our first, or it's my first outing doing a team style event. So it's very experimental so far, but the goal is to sort of keep a close eye on things and make sure nothing gets out of hand. I think sometimes team events can sort of degenerate because people just get very passionate about them. Yeah. And the goal is to sort of nip that in the bud and just have get everybody together to have a good time. And I think that's how it's going to work out. So I'm optimistic. I think it's going to be great, and I'm excited to see how it turns out. We're basically doing this as a trial run for a larger team event. We only had a limited amount of spaces available for this one, so we could keep it down to a low number of rounds. But the idea is to later this summer to have a much larger team event. So I think that's going to be good.
I on a personal note, and having worked in the esports industry a little bit, this kind of stuff, like team tournaments in particular, are really good for that kind of event, for that kind of coverage. There was also a huge amount of interest in Trevy's team stuff. So like that's something that Alpha League also would love to do, is actually start running more tournaments and like team tournaments and stuff as well. But it'll be really cool to see what Trevy does with this. I hope it goes really, really well. And from an esports perspective, like this is kind of like big stuff. There's meta choices. It's easy to stream because you have 5 different games to swap between. That could be really, really cool. So yeah. Malice says good luck, Trevy, in the chat. So yeah, agreed. Okay, Diamond Boots asks, melee upgrades on backline units, are they worth it? I've heard people think it's a bad idea, but I feel it could be a very good way to stop them from being charged by some random chumps, or at the very least fight them off. And it's an interesting argument there. I think that the argument you've been currently having with Creeper in the chat does explain the vast majority of competitive mindset there, which is if you aren't screening them properly, if they're being charged, then something's gone wrong already, my dude. And I think I tend to agree. But there are some armies that don't screen good. Custodes don't screen good. Space Marines don't screen super well unless they have infiltrators, in which case they screen ridiculously well. I think that the main trick there is, if it works for your strategy, like if you have a vulnerable backfield, that's because the rest of your army's forward. If you don't have a vulnerable backfield, then why are you paying the extra points for it? Maybe. Okay.
So this is about giving weapon upgrades to troops to be better in melee versus the backline, or
yeah, effectively, if you have an obsec holder in the back,
yeah,
and you're worried about them getting charged to steal the objective by, say, like, I don't know, 10 guardsmen out of nowhere, or 10 termagants, or something dumb, right? That just kind of snuck into your backfield. Wouldn't having like a shovel help?
I think honestly, like, just having like keeping that MSU unit MSU just to hold the backfield, because it's not gonna have like great saves or anything, is fine, and not spend any additional points. But if you want to have like a unit that is good at like fighting, and leave them as like a counter hammer blow like in the backfield, that's like perfectly acceptable. Something that is going to guarantee like kill like 10 guardsmen. Say for example like 3 Death Shroud. You're running 3 units and you can have 2 running up the board, and you can just leave 1 back behind cover, and then if they come in with something, your Death Shroud go in and just kill it, and the objective is back being yours, and all of a sudden you've got 3 rock solid Terminators just stood there waiting for the next wave, or then they can start to move up and you can replace that MSU unit because you've not spent like any additional points on them.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Sorry, I'm laughing at chat. We'll get there in a minute. Okay, so Dr. Doots, what do y'all think about a real space raid equivalent for a Black Crusade? So taking 3 different patrols of Chaos Space Marines and getting a benefit out of it, or taking multiple different detachments of Chaos Space Marines and getting a benefit out of it. my opinion, interesting. The issue there is fluff. Like, I know Chaos Space Marines occasionally get together for Black Crusades, but those are rare. Most of the time, Chaos Space Marines like don't like working each other, let alone trust each other long enough to not stab each other in the back. So it'd be interesting to see how that would work. I like, honestly, I'm not even sure how to make Chaos work better in general. I think they soup way hard, and I'd love to see more incentive to not soup, but the strength of Chaos is the soup at the moment, and just randomly summoning demons and all this other stuff. So yeah, I'm not sure. Trevy, what do you think?
Maybe you could make it something that's unlocked by like including particular characters. Like, what if Abaddon could run a Black Crusade detachment? You know, something along those lines. If you know, fluff is the worry. I do think Chaos would be benefited from having, I guess, less restrictive sub-faction requirements. I think Drakari is a really good example. They don't have to run like pure detachments, so you can just run whatever you want in a detachment, and you don't necessarily break your sub-faction bonuses. And I think something like that for Chaos, like maybe, you know, at least some you know, getting something from running like a pure Khorne detachment that crosses a couple different factions, I think would be interesting. If that's the direction that they want to go in. I'm sure that the design team like has, you know, they've got something cooking, but I'm not sure what it is.
Orion asks if you think so. Right now, there's okay. To preface this question, there's a couple of assumptions going on about terrain and the amount of it. So, moving forward, do you guys think that the lack of terrain in 8th to the huge abundance of terrain in 9th has perhaps been overtuned? Erever.
Not really. I mean, I get what he's saying, but I don't think the terrain's really gone down. I think it has more of an effect on the game, so we notice it a lot more, right? Like, back in 8th edition, like, there was the huge Nova layout for the big L ruins, and then smaller ruins at the side. Ground floor was obviously line of sight blocking because of the ITC rule, and that was how everyone kind of just played the game. You know, you kind of were able to like build lists around it. I don't think there's more terrain pieces, so to speak, in 9th edition. It's just that those terrain pieces have much more of an impact on the game. So your woods, for example, giving like -1 to hit and -2 to movement is like a big deal. I know Trevy's a big fan of barricades and that sort of thing. You know, and again, that provides a lot of interesting play. Ruins with now like obscuring has a big impact compared to where like you're positioned around that ruin. So I wouldn't say there's an overabundance of terrain. I think it's just the rules make the terrain a lot more impactful that a lot of people have noticed.
Yeah. I also think that Alpha League players in particular have been playing with a ton of ruins and just ruins. Lockjaw's done an excellent job with the maps, but I think that the only criticism I've had is that it would be nice to see a bit more variety. Like, just in terms of the amount of terrain, and that might mean that there's less obscuring, but that also means that there's more dents, there's more craters, there's more tactical variety, and I think that makes the games feel a little bit like there's less of a huge abundance of them. I think the reason why it feels like there's a huge abundance is because it's all ruins all the time, which means that shooting is hard, charging from out of line of sight is very doable, and it makes shooting armies in particular a little bit more difficult to pilot, unless if they are ridiculously fast. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's overtuned. I think that the amount of terrain is good. I think it's the quality of terrain and the type of terrain that might be overtuned in our current maps at the moment. And I would argue that a wider variety of terrain being used, more barricades, so like less ruins, but like more barricades, more craters, more dents, more everything else, and maybe some interesting new terrain where it uses a variety of new combinations of those kinds of things could be very interesting. But that obviously requires the player base to want that, and not everybody wants that. A lot of people like the simplicity and the straightforwardness of the ruins, the fact that they are very balanced in the sense that you can just hide behind them and it works. You can keep some things protected when you want them protected. It's definitely an interesting discussion, but I don't think that the amount of terrain is the problem. I think that the quality of the terrain might be a problem for some places, and that I think as we grow more, as the edition goes on, we'll see if that changes. I somehow get the distinct feeling that it won't, and that a lot of competitive players still really enjoy lots of line of sight obscuring ruins in order to be able to create more of a chessboard situation and less of a war game situation, if that makes sense. Because if you can keep your pieces in a certain place to create a threat, that's just night outposts all over again.
Yeah, I think also, I mean, I honestly, in 9th edition, like, you almost can't put too much terrain on the table, because, like, terrain's so, like, standing in a place for a really long time is way more important now than it was ever in 8th edition. Like, in 8th edition ITC, you put a model on an objective, and your opponent levels a bunch of las cannons and shoots that model off into the objective, and you're like, well, that's too bad. I'll put another model on an objective and score it again. But in 9th edition, that model has to survive for a full round. So if you have low terrain coverage and your opponent can kill all your stuff on all your objectives every turn, you just don't score any points, and they score all the points, and it's like, it's no fun for anybody. You know, you're like, why am I here? This is stupid. So I mean, I think that the amount of terrain that the community has sort of agreed on right now, which I think is mostly like WTC style layouts, has basically taken over everywhere, and I think it's very appropriate. And it seems to me like in-person events are slowly moving towards that direction as well. And that's just sort of the standard that the community will end up at.
Yeah. The chat has pointed out multiple times now that there's always going to be a level of controversy. And I think I heard this. I think the best way to put it is that terrain will always be the number one, like one of the first complaints that'll happen in any edition, no matter what happens. Terrain's always changing. And that's probably fine. Like, it's a war game at the end of the day, and having multiple different kinds of terrain is what makes, like, different maps is what made StarCraft fun. It's what made Dawn of War fun. And, like, all those kinds of strategy games that are good rely on having a variety of different maps and the ability to add new maps to the pool and stuff. We're in a game that allows for complete customization of that.
We do have to sort of coach it, though, a little bit, because I think Warhammer can be more heavily skewed by terrain or lack thereof than any of those other games.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
If you don't put any terrain on the table, you're just like, all right, AdMech, here's a bunch of free wins. Enjoy.
We should do that next season of Alpha.
Just have one map.
Just one map. No, they can change
it's
the table.
It's nothing but like actual like Aegis defense lines. That's
and Imperium statues. Don't forget those.
Yes, inspiring statuary, of course, important.
But that makes sense. And keeping in mind that this is definitely still way better than what was in 8th. I agree with Trevy there. It was so bad in 8th that the FLG had to make up magic boxes and extra rules for like the first floor, so long as all the windows are completely closed framed, means that they are like you can't see through them and all this other stuff. We had to it was a mess by comparison to what we've got now. And although now it's like there's so many rules, I can't keep track of them all. Like, at least there's rules, at least there's definitions, so that's always good. Okay, moving right along. Avery Disappointing Salad, nice long name. They ask, how often does Alpha League run?
Every 8 to 10 weeks. That's the goal this year. So that is what we're looking to do. I think we've got a system now where we can maintain that as well.
Makes sense. Oh God, Pants makes a joke. So this is the one that I laughed at earlier. Trevy, are you okay with having a clipping joke leveled at you, or should we move on?
Like hair clipping, or what?
Pants says Trevy could run really effective IRL events. He'd fit twice as many tables in the room by splitting the room into 2 levels. His players can clip their heads to the ceiling, so it would be fine. Effectively, sure. He's. I guess the question here I have then out of this is, has your opinion on models clipping through like walls and stuff like that, based off of like the way it measurements on bases, has that ruling changed in your T5S2 events, or do you still stick with that?
As far as I know, it hasn't changed now. Like the core rulebook hasn't changed. So.
Yep. Okay.
No.
All right. Good to know. And at that point, Malice then clips me right off from the chat. Fair enough. Based off of what he said. Okay, so Dr. Dutes then mentions that the Army of Renown might be interesting. Do you think that the Armies of Renown in Book of Rust is the beginning of the end via game bloat, or
I will mention, I think,
choices?
to that point, we did introduce a house rule that changes how line of sight interacts with models that protrude through terrain.
Oh yeah.
But you can, like, if you want to put your model next to a wall, you can do that. It's okay. It's okay that his sword touches the wall. No one's gonna no one's gonna get angry at you because his outstretched pistol is, going into a window frame. Like, it's all right, everyone. You can calm down.
Okay, Alex 80 5217 or Alex 80, which is more accurate. This is actually his name. Do you think the Armies of Renown in Book of Rust is the beginning of the end via game bloat, or or the beginning of interesting choices like Heresy Rights of War? I am curious. Yes, it might bloat the game, but then there's going to be a new edition. It's going to reset everything and whatever. When it comes to this right now, I'm worried that it could present a situation like, say, Kill Team, where you have to own 15 different books in order to run an event. And it becomes difficult, and everyone's house ruling a bunch of different things, and there's too many books, too many rules to balance, and it becomes nuts. But because of the fact that there were, like, the Armies of Renown seem to be, so far, in check, and the 2 sub-faction supplements are powerful, but it's only 2 sub-factions. It might be okay. We'll see how many Warzone Caradon books pop out. Are all the rules out for 9th edition DL okay? What are everyone's thoughts on them now? DL okay means, he says, looking it up online.
So he has to guess the acronym, right? I think he means download, but...
What does DLOC mean? I am a boomer.
Defense.
It could mean the Demon Lord of Karandra. I don't think that's what it is.
Of course. That Demon Lord.
That Demon Lord. Okay. So, Drive Shaft, you get back to me on that one. Deathcore Creed. So all the rules are out for Deathcore Creed. Okay. Deathcore of Creed with a G. So, are all the rules out for the Deathcore? And the answer is, sort of. The sub-faction traits are, sure, but we don't have a new Imperial Guard Codex yet.
Well, they're not in it, right? Like, Death Corps of Creed have always got their rules from Forge World, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, but their orders and everything are based on, and a large portion of their models now are based on the Imperial Guard Codex. Are they not?
Well,
a lot of those kinds of rules are from the Imperial Guard Codex, as far as I remember.
I don't think Death Corps of Krieg are in the original Imperial Guard Codex. I could be wrong.
No, they're not in the Imperial Guard Codex, but like the idea of giving, like, the orders rules are from the Imperial Guard Codex. The ability to pick up Kurov's Aquila, Imperial Guard Codex. Imperial Guard Death Corps get 90% of the rules from the Codex. So, yeah, they just have a trait outside of it. They're now a sub-faction. Okay, cool. So, I am correct. Yay! It means that we don't have, like, a good chunk of the rules yet for 9th edition. So, I expect there to be a shake-up. The rules that they currently have are funny, and sort of interesting, but the fact that they only sometimes shoot back for the tanks, and that's what they got, is kind of a big sad. Their main draw right now is currently they have horses, and that's cool, I guess.
They make one melee attack when they die, their characters.
Oh yeah.
It's a guardsman character. Just like make him, let him make all the attacks. Like,
seriously.
He's like swinging one time with a power sword. What are you worried about? Fortunately, Death Riders are incredible. So
yeah,
it's sort of regiment trait agnostic. The profile's just really good. So there you go.
Yeah, go ahead, Iriver. Sorry.
There's gonna be this one time where, like, Magnus charges in on one wound. He kills an Imperial Guard character. This one, like, company commander with his power sword wounds him and kills him. You know that's gonna happen. Don't count it out.
It's gonna be incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the million monkeys and a million typewriters typing up Shakespeare level of odds, but yeah, sure. It's possible. Okay, so Shuma Games, continuing the discussion a little bit about static gun lines, are frustrating and miserable, and that's why the terrain is heavy. That makes some sense. But again, variety of terrain helps there. Dense, light cover, obstacles, all of those things impact shooting. They also impact melee, especially heavy cover. Like, we don't have a whole lot of opportunities where I've said, "Oh, right, I have +1 to hit in melee today." So like, you know, I'm gonna go ahead and stand by my point that I said earlier. Let's continue. Warhammer World will have an 80% win rate for Tau. Incoming meta, UK meta with Tau Sept. Yeah, thanks. I feel loved. Moving right along. There aren't a whole ton more questions. Okay, here we go. TBM. What are the group's thoughts on the current balance of various unit type tags? It's beginning to feel like maps are being balanced in such a way that we're seeing the infantry fly tags we're beginning to see the infantry and fly tags become so incredibly important that things like TWC suffer compared to Wolfguard with packs. So Thunderwolf Cavalry suffer compared to Wolfguard with jump packs. Good idea, good point. With the unit tags, and specifically about infantry and fly, but I would argue that with the way that they nerfed fly, it's one of the very few benefits that fly has left, and it makes fly still good. Infantry have a lot of downsides. They usually tend to move slowly. They tend to be, really easy to expose, and they don't tend to be super durable to an entire army's worth of firepower. But they still want to be important. They still need to be able to have some form of mobility, and having access to the ability to move through ruins and other what would be obstacles for vehicles, I think is a great way to give them the flexibility that they need. It'd be like any other, Advance Wars had a really good terrain system, I find. And one of the things that infantry did is that they moved super slow, except for on a road. At that point, vehicles were super, super good, but if you needed to go over a mountain, if you needed to go through trees or whatever, you needed infantry to do it, and that was great. It gave them a sense of speed in certain situations that vehicles obviously could not have. And this is kind of the same thing. Infantry being able to move through terrain, like ruins and such, allows them to move diagonally across the map in a way that vehicles cannot. Despite their high movement speed, the two of them can actually get to places relatively quickly in their own way. I think that that's well and balanced and interesting. What do you think about that one, Erever?
No, you said there's 3 magic words, Thunderwolf Cavalry, so I want to hear Trevy's take on this.
I think your first problem right there is that you probably shouldn't even be considering Thunderwolf Cavalry over Wolfguard. So there's not much of a comparison. You just take the Wolfguard. You just do that. This is better. But I mean, generally, like infantry or fly specifically has always had a billion benefits to it over ground units, and that's like I don't see that changing anytime soon. And I think that's just how it's going to be until we see some significant changes in like how the core keywords work. So yeah, I don't know. There's that's a core rule that would need to get rewritten, I think, for that dynamic to change. I think I would like to see it change. I think it would be interesting if like breachable or a similar keyword to breachable let anything go through it, or let vehicles go through it or something, large units or something. I think that would be cool and open up some stuff. But until something like that, gets introduced to the game, flying stuff in infantry is just going to be more maneuverable than the other versions, and that's just how it's going to be.
And in response, and there's the idea in here that Texas BBQ 12 just put out. It's that fly is a special ability that you pay for. I think the question is more like infantry versus cav versus vehicle. And at that point, I think there are certain trends behind each of those that are true in most situations, where cavalry are like, unlike vehicles, they come in larger numbers. Like you can have like 12 to a squad rather than vehicles, which come like in squads of 3 max. Infantry have numbers but not as much mobility, and vehicles have mobility and durability and all that stuff, but they do not have they don't have the numbers and all that stuff. Like I think it's it's a cool way to think about them in terms of just like general trends rather than anything else. And the instant you start using those keywords to apply to different things, so if you had something that might normally be a vehicle but suddenly it counts as a cavalry unit, or an infantry unit, I guess, you start getting into some tricky situations. And at that point, that's when you start coming up with more special rules. If you really wanted a breacher vehicle of some kind that could bust through walls, you give them a special rule. You don't just give them the infantry keyword and hope that it works, because that's going to create all kinds of fucky stuff.
Oh, yeah. You definitely need to rework how the terrain works, not how the unit works. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It might be more interesting to give to extend the benefits of cover to more things like cavalry and such. But yeah, I can definitely see that being a thing. Okay, Digital Nova, list building question here for a newer player. So welcome. I'm looking to build a Necron army to try to get into the game. Always been interested, but always found it very expensive until I learned about the TTS version. I have an Overlord or Barge for an HQ, Immortals and Warriors for infantry, either Scorpic Destroyers or Deathmarks for elites. Is there anything you would recommend for a 500-point army? So at this point, what do you guys think would be a great addition to a 500-point collecting Necron army?
I think some. I mean, almost regardless of how you expand an army out, I think some of the Canoptech units are almost always going to be a part of it, either Wraiths or Scarabs.
Yeah.
Like, building out your army to 2,000, basically any 2,000 point army is going to make use of one of, if not both of those units.
Yeah. And I would agree. I would double up on the Scarabs for sure. The Scarabs are really, really good. No matter what list you build, Scarabs are good. They'll be fine. Wraiths, I think that's a bit more arguable, just because they tend to be they're really, really good, but they don't fit in every list as well as others. Scarabs just always work, particularly if you bring my second recommendation, which is a Chronomancer. I think that you cannot really go wrong with bringing one of those if you're bringing infantry of any kind.
Yeah, you've got the advantage here that you're playing on TTS, try before you buy.
Yeah, there you go.
Just do that. That's what I do now with every thing that I'm thinking of buying. Try it out in games before you purchase it. Find what fits your playstyle as well. Don't always go for the top sort of meta thing if it doesn't suit the way you play the game and your brain sort of programmed to play for you. Don't try to.
One more thing. If you are a part of the Necrons Facebook group, whatever you do, for the love of God, do not listen to them. They are. I have never seen so many Necron players be so angry about their own faction. It's singularly frustrating. A lot of them have come up with tier lists that have baffled me recently, and at this point, it's the funniest thing I've ever read in my life. Every morning I wake up to a new tier list, and every morning it's like a Saturday morning cartoon. It's hilarious.
They're role playing appropriately. They're just sad that their empire has fallen. My units don't kill everything with one attack anymore. We did that 12 million years ago, but no longer. Our batteries have run dry, and now we're just strength 5 AP2.
Yeah, admittedly, I'm good at it too. I can complain to you about why does the Doomsday Arc have D6 damage shots instead of one
D3 plus 3 now, right?
Yeah, where's my D3 plus 3 damage? Come on. I mean, at least we got the 80-point reanimator. It's actually kind of interesting now. Okay. Going back through. So, are different lists regularly winning T5S2 versus Alpha? And do Trevy/Erever think this is due to player pool differences or the tournament rule differences? So, this is two questions in one. Are different lists regularly winning? I think the answer is yes, no matter who answers that one. The meta right now is varied. There are a lot of good armies. And armies that are S tier aren't so far above the Pack Plus units these days. I don't think. So I guess
the tournament format goes a lot into it as well too. I think because the two events are run super differently. So the events that I run, we run they're kind of RTT plus level events, but we run several a week. So we get kind of these little small snapshots of a smaller. Independent pools of players, whereas Alpha, correct me if I'm wrong, has the group stages, which are just sort of they're like 4 random people thrown together.
It's the Wild West. Mind you, the Wild West organized by skill over time.
Yeah, but then you will break it down to a top cut that's probably a little bit more representative of the meta, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think once you get to that level, I think the list will start looking very similar. But looking at whoever's good in a group stage versus whoever wins a 16-player pod it's kind of a crapshoot.
But even like considering last year's finals, like we had a variety of lists. There was a Necron Silvertide list that was Novak and Silent King backing it up. We had a Sisters list with Junie, a bunch of Retributors, and a bunch of Repentia. We had an AdMech list that ended up winning the event. We've had Orc Buggy list that made it up, the Macron list. Like there's a variety of lists that make it up there. And mind you, the rules differences change things. So, like, Tau suck in both cases, but they extra suck in Alpha League because you can't fall back and shoot based off of the way that they ruled Monka.
We have also ruled that way.
Yeah, so never mind. No, they just suck. So there's that going on.
How that rule is worded. So there you go.
Oof, big sad.
It's not just us, Slow Wolf. You can't just blame me anymore.
I had a Tau player touch base with me the other day, and they were just like, "Just FYI, I totally agree with you ruling on that on the Monka."
Like,
I really appreciate it.
Some
people super didn't.
Well, okay, there are some people that super didn't, and like I was super salty about it. All credits to the Pants, who I think is still in chat. He sat me down and like explained it in all of it, like explained it properly, and I was like, I don't like it, but fine. And this is also a pod where I've been shut down twice. Hey, chat, I told you, 2 experienced TOs and 1 moron sit down and talk Warhammer. That's today's podcast.
So on that question, sorry, I just want to cut in for a minute.
Please do.
Yeah, so like the one thing we have noticed that a few players have noticed now is that the top 4 groups, because we're seeing a lot of people come back and everything like that, are getting dubbed like murder groups because like after like 4 games, everyone seems to just be taking wins off each other, because everyone's like, 1, like a really good player, and 2, they're bringing like the strongest list that TTS can muster for their faction as well. So we are kind of seeing that trend like come a lot more in Alpha League, and people either love that or they hate it. Like,
Creeper says make murder pods a mainstay, please. All right, let's take on like 2 more questions because this has gone on long. We all have lives that we eventually want to get to eventually. So let's go in them from top to bottom. TBM asks, are Space Wolves still the best home for Dreads and Space Marines, or has anyone found a better home for them? Sometimes I want big stompy robots that aren't made of gold. We've seen some evidence. Erever?
Iron Hands.
Yeah.
Like Chris Helgren run triple Redemptor with all the trimmings, like giving them the 5-up invol, +1 to hit on one of them, and all that kind of good stuff. Dev Doctrine was great. So I think outside of Space Wolves, that is definitely a viable way to play Dreadnoughts for sure.
And surprisingly strong against Chaos. It turns out that having Armor of Contempt and having everything from a Magnus go into it for 3 turns, still not kill a single Dreadnought, is pretty intense. So like, that thing, it works. It's a really good place for it. It's also one of the few places where like the Forge World Space Marine Dreadnoughts, I think, really come into their own. Because of the fact that they don't have core, being able to put them in Iron Hands to give them that 6 of feel no pain, and a bunch of other benefits, plus the ability to make them characters and such is pretty great. Okay.
I think if you want to play like 3 Redemptors, I think Iron Hands is probably the way to go. If you want to play like a billion Dreadnoughts, I think it's still Space Wolves. Just taking like 6 of the Storm Shield guys or the Blizzard Shield guys, and then 3 Redemptors to back it up is like a pretty legit list.
Yeah.
I don't think that list is going anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
That
makes
just to
sense.
go into that one, Custodes as well, like the Talaman and the Little Talaman that I like to call them.
Sometimes I want big stompy robots that aren't gold.
But they're technically Space Marines, right?
No, and they're gold.
Imperium, they're fine.
No gold.
They have transhuman physiology even. It's like the same faction.
No gold. Okay.
They have right war, but it's a table-wide aura.
Okay, final question. It looks like it's actually the final question in the list of chat right now that I've managed to find. So, woohoo! Victor Von Champ asks, do we know the Codex roadmap like before? No new Codex this month. All right, let's go with the first one. Is there a new Codex this month? I think so. AdMech is coming soon?
It sounds like AdMech may be early March or early May.
Yeah, something like that. We're expecting the AdMech to come soon, but again, with COVID, Brexit, and everything else, I'm sure it's chaos. Unadulterated chaos.
And Chaos won't see a new codex for a long time.
Yeah.
I think
Don't worry
people
about
were expecting a preview article for AdMech to drop today if they were going to
Mhm.
come out by the end of the month, and it didn't happen. Or to drop this weekend.
Yeah. And we've heard lots of rumors, Pigsy, about... Well, I've heard rumors about Sisters and Orcs also coming out. Sisters have their new data sheets popping up in some of the boxes. Orcs, not sure where we heard that one, but it seems to be popping up a lot.
Well, they got a whole trailer.
Yeah, they got a whole trailer. So like,
They got a whole trailer and a new Squig boy on a
Orcs.
riding a Squig.
Orcs. It's a good time. Okay, so Creeper mocking me, Orion telling me to play Knights. not even. Look, that's enough. We we are out of time, and I am out of throat juice at this point. I am dry. I am about ready to like die. So I think that's enough talking out of me at least, and enough talking out of the podcast. Before we go, I want to go ahead and give the floor to Trevy to plug the ever-loving crap out of everything he does. Go nuts.
Absolutely. Yeah, let me drop some links in chat here.
Please, as much as you like.
Cause I make a bunch of 40K content, so come hang out with me. So I mostly do videos over on youtube.com/tacticaltortoise, and I'll throw that in. So that's where I do a lot of video content, mostly talking about competitive 40K. I also stream over on twitch.tv/tacticaltortoise.tv. And I not only stream my games, but also I will commentate games from the T5S2 finals. So usually if you want to see some really good high-level competitive 40K over there, usually we're live a couple times a week with that. Yeah, that's mostly where we're at. If you join either one of those, you'll be able to get a link to our Discord channel, and that's where we play a whole boatload of Tabletop Simulator 40K. We run the pod system. We talked about a couple times. Basically, I'm launching 2 to 3 tournaments every week, and they're like between 8 and 16 player tournaments for the most part, besides some special ones that we do, usually monthly or bi-monthly. And you just jump in and post in a wait list there, and you'll get added to an event as soon as it drops. Usually it's about a week or two before you get into one at this point in the season. And at the end of the season, we'll grab your scores, both from the Tactical Tortoise Discord server, but also there's a bunch of independent online GTs that also will submit scores to the series, to the T5S2 series. And the top 16 of those we bring to an invitational tournament over on the the channel, and that usually goes for about 2 weeks. That's super fun. We do a group stage into an elimination stage, and then crown a T5S2 season winner every 6 months, which is super cool. So yeah, hope you come hang out. I'll drop a Discord link into the chat as well.
Please do.
And you can come hang out with us over there. We also have, we have LFG channels as well. People are playing in there all the time, like literally 24/7. We got games of TTS 40K. So I think it's like the number 2 place to go after the main TTS server. So we're having a good time playing a million billion games. And if you play in any other servers, generally speaking, if they do tournaments, most of them are scored for T5S2 as well. So you might even have some points and you don't even know it.
Wow. Well, thank you very much, Trevy, and I'd like to thank you personally for being on here as well. It's always a blast. I have a lot of fun with you on here, so it was good to have you on, dude.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. I like talking to you guys, so it's always a good time.
Speaking of you guys, Erever, would you like to go ahead and tell the chat where they can find you and give any last announcements or plugs for the TTS Warhammer 40K community that we've got going on here?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on my new Twitch channel, where we're doing some pretty exciting things with Death Guard, because it's very heavily Death Guard focused. We're looking to paint up a 2,000 point army of Death Guard in a month. So I'm just kind of like doing hobby hangouts with that right now. So it's just generally chatting, chilling out, answering questions and stuff like that. And the other thing we're doing there is we're looking at off-meta like Death Guard builds to play games with on TTS, so not running like Volkite Consensus, for example, and things like that. I'm looking at some of the more interesting like picks in the codex and trying to find ways to like make those work. and things like that. So that's the Twitch. You can also find me on the TTS 40k Discord server. Got a great community over there. Lots of people playing lots of games all the time. Alpha League is just one part of it. If you're new to the hobby, we have a great mentor team that can get you started. Set up with 40k, we have narrative events such as War in 7 Fronts, which is great to be a part of. And other than that, just come along, say hi, play some games of Warhammer, you know, and then get into Alpha League from there. So that's the link for the Discord. Finally, if you missed any of our content, be it stream games from last season, past episodes of podcasts, anything like that, we do have a YouTube, which is growing quite nicely since we started using it again. So go check that out too. And other than that, yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been great. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's your fault I'm here. With that said, that's not the only thing we got going on. If you guys are feeling particularly generous and want to start and feel like you can financially support us, the TTS 40k group does in fact have a Patreon now. Wow. patreon.com/TTSWH40k. I'm going to go ahead and put that link in the chat for you folks. That way you guys can go there if you're feeling, again, particularly generous. That'll help us to hopefully expand and grow and maybe even start developing stuff like prize support, creating new tournaments and all that stuff as well. It's still in its infancy. If you have any actual questions about that, go ahead and at TTS Warhammer 40k or Malice in the Discord as well to talk about that kind of stuff, because it's obviously of interest to you at that point. Our supporters, we want to go ahead and give back to people that support us. So, Pigsy the Battle Pig, no, we don't kill heretics with the money. In fact, apparently, we seem to hire them, Erever in particular. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and do some plugs on my own. My name's Slow Wolf, and I am producing the streams for this channel for reasons unknown. Mostly Erever said so. And then you can find me on a variety of different places. You can find me at Twitter as @SlowWolf, on YouTube as SlowWolf Gaming. You can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/SlowWolf. I even have a Facebook page, but don't bother. I come around a lot on the Discord, and I play games there every once in a while, but I tend to end up casting them. We got casts happening on Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sundays where we do those podcasts. Hello, podcast time. But yeah, Thursdays and Saturdays we do games and we cast them, and it's fun, and it's usually me and Erever and one other person, or it's just me and Erever, because the two of us get along that way. Yeah, I'd like to go ahead and offer a special thanks to Erever for hopping on here and organizing the tournament. Without him, there would be no tournament. Without Malice, there'd be no community hub, so I'd like to offer special thanks to him as well. I'd like to offer a special thank you to Trevy for hopping on here and talking with us, as his expertise obviously made this podcast work, I think is a good way of putting it. Without Trevy, this particular episode would not have functioned. His expertise and his observations were instrumental to making this an excellent and informative episode for everyone. I'd like to go ahead and thank all of you who are watching this episode and listening to it. Without you, there would be no show. And without a show, well, I'd be talking to nobody by myself. I'd be in a padded room. It would not be good. Having you folks here makes this obviously a lot better for all of us and makes it interesting and fun, and we like putting this show on for you. So, yay! Also, there wouldn't be a community. So, yeah, big thanks to all of you. You should all give yourselves a pat on the back. Just make sure to wash your hands after. With that said, that's it for our show for tonight. Thank you everybody so much for coming by and for listening and for watching. We hope to see you folks on the next podcast sometime in the grimdark future where there is only war and apparently the sound of my voice because I can't shut up. Bye!
Goodbye, everybody.